The world begins with a vast, overcast expanse. A dark gray sky stretches out, silent and heavy with the weight of an unspoken question. Beneath that leaden firmament, a single eye opens, capturing the first flicker of consciousness. This moment, etched in clarity, marks the very beginning of a long journey through memory. As a young child, he lay amidst the rustling leaves, finding a strange, profound peace in the stillness. He surrendered himself to the rhythmic pulse of his own heartbeat, a sensation that felt both alien and incredibly pleasant. Years later, the boy has grown, but his search for that elusive sensation continues in the shadows of an abandoned room. He illuminates the dusty corners with his phone, though his expression is one of mild disappointment. The atmosphere lacks the chilling, spooky presence he had hoped to find. Outside, the weathered facade of the old building stands unremarkable against the twilight. It is a place devoid of tragic history or lingering spirits, offering nothing more than the mundane reality of an aging structure within walking distance of home. He stands by a window, looking out at the world he has already thoroughly explored. With a sigh of resignation, he realizes that he has finally exhausted all the supposedly haunted locations in his immediate neighborhood. As he begins to leave, his mind drifts toward the future and the possibilities that high school will bring, allowing him to travel further in search of truly legendary sights. However, his thoughts are abruptly cut short by a sudden, sharp sound from nearby. Turning toward the source of the commotion, he finds two girls locked in a heated confrontation. One of them shouts in a voice thick with frustration and desperation, demanding to be let go and accusing the other of being suffocated. She stands firm as the other girl attempts to offer a weak defense, her voice trembling as she tries to explain her intentions. She immediately cuts her off, her expression sharp and unforgiving as she commands the other to stop talking back. Her verbal assault continues without mercy, as she declares that even the other girl's presence is depressing and her voice is nothing but a grating noise that she loathes. The weight of these words causes the dark-haired girl to look away in shame, whispering that she never meant for things to go this way, while her tormentor remains cold and unmoved. Unrelenting, she leans in closer, her eyes narrowed with a predatory intensity as she questions if the other girl is going to play the victim now, insisting there is a valid reason for her cruelty. As the tension reaches a breaking point, the dark-haired girl can only offer a confused and hurt look, unable to comprehend the sheer vitriol being directed at her. Suddenly, a grotesque, wide-eyed face with a jagged, toothy maw looms directly behind the aggressor, causing her to freeze in absolute terror as a cold shudder runs down her spine. With a piercing scream, she bolts down the street in a blind panic, leaving behind the monster, who reveals himself to be a young man pulling off a hyper-realistic mask. He often keeps this grotesque disguise on hand to hide his face in a pinch, and he seems amused that such a simple prank worked so well. He turns toward the other girl, stowing the mask away while explaining that he felt compelled to intervene. Though he didn't know the full story of their conflict, he couldn't stand by while one person was being so relentlessly overwhelmed by another's cruelty. She stares at him in stunned silence, a faint blush creeping onto her cheeks as the realization dawns on her that this stranger had stepped in specifically to protect her from the verbal onslaught. She stands before him, her voice soft as she dismisses his worries about interfering. Haruka is busy stuffing the monster mask back into his bag, questioning his own decision to step in, but she quickly reassures him that his help was welcome. A faint, shy smile touches her lips as she looks down, admitting that his willingness to go out of his way for her brought her a sense of genuine happiness. Suddenly, her eyes widen in a moment of sharp realization. She has forgotten the most basic courtesy. She leans in, asking for his name so she can properly express her gratitude, but the request seems to startle him, and he frantically insists that his actions weren't a big deal. Before she can press further, he abruptly announces his departure, wishing her a safe trip home as he begins to back away. He turns and bolts down the street, leaving Kisaki standing there in stunned silence, her hand raised as if to call him back, while he disappears into the distance, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. Left alone in the quiet of the afternoon, she stares at the empty space where he stood, her expression unreadable as she processes the strange encounter. Meanwhile, he continues his frantic flight, his shoes pounding against the pavement as he pushes himself to run faster and further away from the interaction. Eventually, his strength fails him, and he collapses forward, hands on his knees as he gasps for air, relishing the rhythmic thrum of his own heartbeat and the physical release of his straining muscles. Looking up at the fading light, he reflects on the sensation, acknowledging that while the physical exertion provides a temporary escape, it still doesn't quite feel the same as what he truly desires. He stands before her as she asks for his name, the sound of a spray can clicking in his hand. Later, standing by a hedge and taking a long drink from his water bottle, he considers the standard introduction he would give. Haruka Kawatsuji, a 15-year-old middle schooler in his third year, a member of the track and field team with a penchant for horror stories. He stares off into the distance, the mundane details of his life feeling hollow and insufficient. As he walks along the paved path, a heavy sense of stagnation settles over him, the realization that nothing in his world ever truly changes. He finds this feeling of emptiness triggering a memory of a tall apartment complex from his childhood, the site of a terrifying accident. He recalls the moment he slipped from a high balcony after climbing onto the handrail while his mother was distracted, only surviving because a tree miraculously broke his fall. Though he was told the details later, the boy barely remembers the descent itself, only the aftermath of being held tightly. He vividly remembers the sensation of his heart hammering against his ribs, a rare moment where he felt truly, vibrantly alive. His mother, her face etched with worry, pleaded with him never to go near anything he could fall from again. They sealed the request with a pinky promise, establishing the one and only rule she ever strictly enforced. He stood atop the jungle gym, a small figure silhouetted against the vast sky, seeking that fleeting sensation of being untethered from the world below. This desire drove him to race others, finding a simple, addictive joy in the frantic thrumming of his heart against his ribs as he pushed his young body to its limits. Even the shadows of narrow alleyways became a playground for his curiosity. He often wondered if a sudden encounter with a monster hiding in the dark might finally provide the genuine scare he craved. These childhood explorations were all driven by a primal instinct, a lingering echo of the day he felt that refused to fade, vibrating deep within his soul. As he grew older, he sought out new ways to trigger that response, from the manufactured dread of horror movies to the physical exhaustion of sprinting on the school track. Yet the lingering adrenaline always felt insufficient. Every attempt felt hollow and feeble, like a faint, artificial imitation of a much deeper, more primordial sound that he could no longer reach. Surrounded by classmates like Nishimura, he felt a growing sense of detachment, as if the reality of daily life was drifting further away while the hazy, mist-filled days simply marched on without him. Walking home alone in the twilight, he looked up at the power lines and wondered with a heavy heart if he would ever truly get the chance to experience that same rush of life again. Half a year later, at the high school entrance ceremony, he stood before his new peers to introduce himself. He stated clearly that he was Haruka Kawatsuji, formerly of Mitsuji Middle School, hoping this new chapter might offer something more than the mundane. He sat at his desk, the familiar routine of a new school year unfolding around him. The same scripted introductions he had recited at every milestone of his life felt hollow, a repetitive cycle that had finally brought him to the halls of high school. As the introductions continued, a girl stood before the class, her voice steady as she announced her previous school, Mirai Girls Middle. He watched her, the back of her dark hair a stark contrast to the bright classroom. Turning slightly, she revealed a gentle smile and a faint blush, introducing herself as Kisaki Tokano. Her eyes held a depth that seemed to catch the light, a quiet confidence radiating from her poised stance. Her name hung in the air, sending a jolt through him as he processed the connection. Around them, the rest of the students remained oblivious, caught up in the mundane chatter of the first day. He was later approached by her, as she marveled at the sheer coincidence of them being assigned to the same school. Nearby, a notice on the chalkboard reminded the class of the upcoming group photo, but her focus remained entirely on the boy before her. With a warm, sincere expression, she confessed her happiness at seeing him again, explaining that she had long wanted an opportunity to express her gratitude. Her words were met with a humble deflection as he looked away, his hand instinctively moving to his neck while insisting he hadn't done anything significant. In his mind, he recalled the distance between them after that fateful day, never expecting their paths to cross again. Yet he was relieved to see her life had improved. She didn't let his modesty deter her, leaning in slightly with a look of profound gratitude. To her, every positive change in her life was a direct result of his actions. Seeing the conviction in her eyes, he offered a small, resigned smile. He accepted that, from her point of view, he was the catalyst for her current happiness. He watched as a sudden realization caused her to gasp softly, her hand flying to her mouth in surprise. He quickly followed up, suggesting that since they were now classmates sharing the same duties, they should set aside the formalities and speak more naturally. Haruka sits at his desk, feeling the awkward tension in the room. He remarks on how stiff the atmosphere is, letting out a nervous laugh. Kisaki, standing with her back to him, softly agrees with his assessment. The classroom's quiet is broken as a student leader calls for everyone to line up by their desk numbers for a group photo. The students begin to shuffle into position, preparing for the formal record of their new class. As the sun shines brightly through the window, the room fills with the sound of desks rattling against the floor. Amidst the movement, Haruka reaches out, expressing his hope that he and Kisaki can become friends. She responds with a shy, hesitant agreement, her voice trailing off as she tries to find the right words. Later, Nishimura stands at the front of the room, chalk in hand. He addresses the class, asking for volunteers for various committees, specifically looking for those willing to serve as library helpers. He writes his name clearly on the board, establishing his role in the process. Rinko leans toward Haruka, her expression serious as she offers some practical advice. She points out that he will likely be forced into a committee role sooner or later, so he might as well choose one now. Taking her words to heart, he raises his hand and mentions his previous experience as a library helper during middle school. Nishimura quickly accepts the offer, noting that he is a perfect fit for the position. To his surprise, Kisaki also raises her hand, volunteering for the same duty. The two of them are officially assigned to the library committee, their paths crossing once again in a shared responsibility. The first meeting of the library committee soon comes to a close. An announcement echoes through the quiet halls, dismissing the students and concluding the initial organizational activities for the year. Walking together down the school corridor, Haruka marvels at the coincidence of them both ending up in the same group. He starts to comment on the familiarity of the situation, but then catches himself, deciding some things are better left unsaid. She turns to him, her gaze curious as she asks if he enjoys reading. He takes a moment to consider his answer before admitting that while he does read, his true passion lies within the realm of horror. She walks quietly beside him as he lists his various hobbies, which surprisingly lean toward the macabre, including horror movies, games, and novels. He adds that he even enjoys exploring haunted spots, a confession that leads him to realize that a similarly eerie setting was the backdrop for their very first encounter. She gazes downward, a faint blush coloring her cheeks as she wonders aloud if their meeting was more than a simple coincidence, perhaps even a twist of fate. He quickly tries to backtrack, waving his hands in a panic to explain that he didn't mean the word fate in such a serious or heavy way, though her wide-eyed, trembling reaction suggests she is deeply affected. Later, the atmosphere shifts as a spiky-haired student confronts him in the cafeteria, loudly labeling him as Sly One for his sudden proximity to a popular girl. He continues his loud interrogation, pointing out that the school year has barely begun, and yet Haruka is already making moves on the mysterious Tokano. He is eventually told to mind his own business, as Haruka brushes off the jealous outburst while another student nearby remains silently focused on his noodles. Watching the scene from a distance, a light-haired student muses on Haruka's character, noting that while he is a decent person, he always seems strangely detached. Nearby, the dark-haired Watarai admits to a nihilistic urge to see the world burn, a sentiment so bleak that his companion can only describe it as an unsettlingly specific personality trait. The boy eventually retreats to the water fountain, trying to dismiss the unsettling feeling of being watched by a girl from across the room, though the strange, aggressive fizzing of his drink only mirrors his growing internal unease. She muses softly to herself, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips as she considers how certain encounters are meant to set the heart racing. He, meanwhile, struggles with a vending machine, his thoughts drifting to his own perceived lack of excitement until the sudden, overflowing fizz of his drink catches him off guard. Later, as the school day concludes, the two stand by the exit, and she offers a warm farewell, promising to see him again tomorrow. As he walks away with his classmates, the sound of a departing bus punctuates the air while his friends tease him about the nature of his relationship with the girl he just left behind. Their banter is suddenly interrupted when a girl in a different school's uniform steps forward, her gaze fixed intently on him as she asks for a moment of his time. His friend Ryuji doesn't miss the opportunity to joke about his supposed popularity with girls from other schools, though he quickly dismisses the teasing with a dry remark about Ryuji's lack of parental authority over him. He looks closer at the stranger, a jolt of recognition hitting him as he realizes she is the same person who had been watching him earlier in the day. She remains composed, explaining that she waited until his companion had gone home because she specifically needs to speak with him in private. The conversation moves to the quiet, secluded grounds of the Susa Botanical Garden, away from the prying eyes of the school crowd. There, she reveals that she has been searching for him at the school gates for days, finally identifying him by eavesdropping on his conversation at the bus stop, leaving him utterly bewildered by her persistence. She issues a chilling ultimatum, her eyes sharp with a dangerous intensity as she demands that Haruka stay far away from Kisaki Tokano. This warning stems from a history that began in their third year of middle school, when she found herself seated next to Rinko Asami. Despite there being no major reason for it, she decided on a whim to start talking to the girl beside her. As they spent more time together, she found Rinko to be surprisingly pleasant, though she couldn't quite explain why the other girl seemed to take such a genuine, sudden liking to her. She honestly thought Rinko was cute and was baffled that someone so talkative didn't have any other friends. One day, she casually mentioned changing her shampoo as a way to further their connection. Rinko looked puzzled by the sudden comment, but she simply smiled and revealed that she had switched to the exact same brand Rinko used, a small detail that felt significant to her. Their bond deepened until she began showing up at Rinko's house unannounced, waiting by the gate every morning so they could walk to school together. When Rinko expressed shock at her presence, she merely brushed it off with a smile, insisting that as friends, it was only natural for her to be there waiting. However, the friendship took a dark turn when she confronted Rinko for spending time with another girl, her voice trembling with the fear of being replaceable and her eyes welling with tears. She leaned in close, her gaze becoming vacant and intense as she begged Rinko to promise she would only ever hang out with her, repeating her name over and over like a desperate prayer. With her hands framing her face in a haunting, wide-eyed stare, she demands an answer, her obsession finally fully unmasked. She had been the target of a final, desperate rejection, pushed away by cruel words intended to end the fixation once and for all. As the memory of that day is recounted, it becomes clear that after that outburst, the obsessive girl never made another move, seemingly disappearing from the other's life. Despite the sudden silence, a lingering dread remained, especially when she learned the other girl was taking entrance exams for a different school. She had hoped the obsession had simply shifted to a new, unfortunate soul, allowing her to finally breathe a sigh of relief. The boy, however, remains skeptical, questioning if there is any actual proof of this supposed victimization. He finds it hard to believe that someone would go to such lengths, and his doubt clearly stings, prompting a sharp, defensive retort from her as she stands her ground. To settle the matter, she reaches into her bag, her movements purposeful and swift. He watches with a look of confusion, unsure of what she intends to reveal to convince him of the truth. She presents her smartphone, revealing a relentless barrage of missed calls and desperate messages sent to their mutual acquaintance. The digital trail of harassment is undeniable, filled with apologies and demands for a chance to explain, proving that the obsession has found a new target. He stares at the screen in silence, the weight of the evidence finally sinking in. When she offers to show him photos from their time as friends to further prove her point, he quietly declines, having seen more than enough to understand the gravity of the situation. A new realization dawns on him as he considers the lengths the girl would go to, wondering if she would truly change her entire life path just to attend the same school. Her response is immediate and chilling. She would, without a second thought. She speaks with the grim authority of someone who has lived through the nightmare, asserting that the girl is absolutely capable of such calculated maneuvers. Her first-hand experience leaves no room for further doubt, painting a terrifying picture of a predator in wait. She warns him that any coincidence used to get close to him is a carefully constructed lie. As she speaks, the memory of a hand reaching out, a gesture of false intimacy, looms over the conversation, suggesting that the girl's influence is already closer than he realizes. A cold shiver runs down his spine as the true scale of the danger becomes clear. Trembling, he finally asks the one question that has been haunting him. Why is she sharing all of this with him now? He stands in the open air, processing the weight of the revelation while the girl with the short bob begins to walk away. She admits that while it might seem strange, she feels a sense of liberation now, though she questions his decision to linger near the gates when the situation clearly unnerves him. Turning her head slightly, she explains that this warning is merely her way of settling a debt. She felt a moral obligation to ensure he was aware of the danger lurking in the shadows. As her voice lingers, a chilling image of the dark-haired girl watching from behind a thick trunk comes to mind, accompanied by a final, stern piece of advice. He must maintain his distance from her before the situation spirals beyond his control. The following morning, the young man walks through the school corridors, his expression clouded by the previous night's warnings. The mundane routine of the school day feels heavy as he navigates the halls. Upon entering the classroom, his gaze immediately finds her sitting quietly at her desk, a silent island amidst the chatter of their classmates. He pauses, steeling his resolve for the confrontation he knows is necessary. He approaches her desk with a measured pace, offering a standard morning greeting to break the silence. When he asks if she has a moment to speak, she flinches visibly, her shoulders tensing at his sudden proximity. Looking up at him, her dark eyes seem even more hollow and intense than usual as she softly agrees to listen. He stands firm, his face set with a serious expression as he tells her plainly that there is something important they must discuss. They relocate to a quieter part of the building, standing a few paces apart near the windows. The distance between them feels physical and charged with an unspoken tension as they prepare to address the elephant in the room. He struggles to find the right words, his brow furrowed in concentration. He confesses his uncertainty, admitting that he is still unsure of the best way to broach the unsettling truths he has learned. In response, she remains deathly still, her breath hitching in a sharp, audible exhale. Her head bows, allowing her long, dark hair to veil her face entirely, leaving her thoughts and reactions a complete mystery. She stands frozen as the question hangs in the air, a direct and unexpected proposal from the boy standing before her. The shock registers instantly, her eyes widening as the weight of his words sinks in, leaving her momentarily speechless. Seeing her hesitation, he quickly offers her an out, assuring her that there is no pressure to accept if she isn't ready, though his own heart is likely racing. She begins to stammer, her voice small and uncertain as she clarifies that her silence wasn't a rejection, but rather a moment of profound surprise. Her hands move to her collar, fingers tightening around the fabric as she issues a cryptic warning, questioning if he truly understands the nature of the bond he is seeking. A visible tremor takes hold of her body, her eyes clouding with an intense, swirling focus that suggests a deep, perhaps dangerous, well of emotion is being tapped into. Nearby, Rinko watches with growing unease, noting the unsettling change in the girl's gaze as she admits to herself that once this threshold is crossed, there is no turning back. With a flushed face and a gaze that seems to pierce right through him, she finally confesses her feelings, proving that she truly can voice the depths of her heart with a desperate, all-consuming devotion. The sheer force of her declaration hits him like a physical wave, sending shoes and books tumbling as his very soul vibrates with a primordial resonance that eclipses any pale imitation of love he has ever known. He stands there, absorbing the reality of her raw and unstable affection, realizing that despite its bizarre nature, her love is undeniably real and powerful. A wide, genuine smile breaks across his face as he thanks her, his own excitement mirroring the intensity of the moment as they step into this new, uncertain reality together. He watched as she clasped her hands together, a soft, radiant smile spreading across her face. In that moment, the light in her eyes sparkled with an intensity he had never seen before. She spoke his name with a gentle gratitude, thanking him for his confession. It was a display of affection so profound it felt as though time itself had slowed down, marking the beginning of a love that would make any heart skip a beat. He steps out into the morning, the gentle sunlight warming his face as the faint bustle of the streets begins to rise. With a final wave back toward the house, he calls out a farewell, setting off for what appears to be a perfectly normal day. Despite the mundane surroundings, a strange sensation hums through his very bones, a feeling he can only describe as something magical. It is a stark contrast to the ordinary routine he has always known. As he reaches the door, a familiar voice calls out his name, cutting through his thoughts. He realizes then how much his world has shifted. The simple fact of having a girlfriend has turned the mundane into something entirely new. She is waiting for him, her dark eyes bright as she offers a cheerful greeting and comments on the beautiful weather. Since the moment they met, her presence has become a constant, albeit intense, part of his life. He returns the greeting with a calm smile, though a curious thought lingers in his mind. He never shared his home address with her, yet here she stands, waiting at his doorstep. Her nature is undeniably eccentric and obsessive, a possessive streak that some might find terrifying. Yet, as he looks at her, he knows that this specific brand of intensity is exactly the thrill he has been seeking. While they stand together near the transit map, she mentions that it took her quite some time to reach his location. He notes the layout of the bus routes, realizing she has traveled from the complete opposite direction of the school just to meet him. Leaning in close, she admits with a casual air that she simply deduced his entire schedule to ensure she wouldn't miss him. He finds the revelation fascinating rather than unsettling, intrigued by her dedication. It all begins to make sense to him now. He concludes that she must have followed him home at least once, a single instance being all she needed to pinpoint exactly where he lived. He reflects on how she had been secretly nurturing the seeds of a love that might never have come to fruition, all without a single moment of hesitation. Standing at the bus stop, she suddenly takes charge, pointing the way and urging him to move so they won't be late. He is momentarily stunned by her sudden shift in energy, remembering her warning that she would be going all out from the very beginning. Once they are settled on the bus, she fixes him with an unwavering, intense stare that doesn't break for a second. He feels the weight of her gaze, sweating under the pressure and wondering how he is supposed to react to such raw, focused attention. Despite the intensity, he finds himself captivated, realizing that he actually enjoys the way she constantly keeps him off balance. Noticing his reaction, she quickly looks away and offers a soft apology, admitting that it is a bit embarrassing to be caught staring so intently. He can only offer a startled exclamation in return, caught off guard by her sudden bashfulness. As the bus carries them along, she rests her chin on her hand and muses aloud about the reality of their situation, finally acknowledging that they are truly dating now. He takes the opportunity to bring up a question that has been lingering in his mind, asking why she had specifically requested to start their relationship the following day instead of right then. This brings back the memory of her standing outside, looking hesitant as she made that seemingly selfish request to delay the official start of their romance. While he hadn't thought to ask for the reason at the time, his curiosity has returned, and he looks at her expectantly for an answer. She leans closer to him, her voice low as she explains that the timing simply hadn't been right until that moment. She explains that a certain thing had made it feel wrong to start their relationship the previous day. A memory surfaces of a warning given to him, a stern command to stay away from her, which she felt would have cast a shadow over their beginning. Because of that, she felt it was better to wait so they could start their special first day on a positive note. She admits she needed time to prepare, fearing that he might have been feeling down after her sudden confession earlier that morning. He finally understands the reason behind her hesitation, acknowledging her need to be prepared. However, he then admits that there is something else weighing on his own mind. She reacts with a soft, surprised sound, her gaze lingering on him. He notices her reaction and gently asks what is troubling her. He then offers an apology, explaining that he just remembered he has some business to attend to after school. This means they won't be able to make the journey home together today. She takes the news gracefully, noting that whatever he needs to do today is fine, as they will have plenty of opportunities for shared walks in the future. The bus continues its route, the engine's hum fading into the distance as it passes under a traffic signal. Elsewhere, Kisaki is walking alone, finishing a phone call. She confirms she is on her way back and promises to send a message once she arrives home. After hanging up, she lets out a small, private laugh, seemingly amused by her own thoughts as she continues her walk. Suddenly, she jolts in surprise as a familiar voice calls out to her. It is Tokano, who has appeared unexpectedly and greets her with a calm, "Hello, Rinko-chan." She stands behind the other girl, her presence sudden and unsettling. Kisaki is visibly startled, questioning why it's so strange to see her after all this time since graduation. Leaning in close, her dark eyes bore into Kisaki's, dismissing the notion that things have changed. She knows the truth, and her intense gaze makes it clear that no time has passed in her mind. Standing together at the bus stop, she confronts Kisaki about her actions from 2 days prior. She had observed Kisaki checking the bus, searching for Kawatsuji-kun. She continues her explanation, detailing how she had boarded the bus herself and watched Kisaki's search. Kisaki is stunned, insisting to herself that she hadn't done anything out of the ordinary and wondering how her secret could be known. Her focus narrows as she recalls the events. Luckily, the next station wasn't far, and she managed to find Kisaki just as she was attempting to speak with him. Watching her closely, Kisaki realizes with a jolt of panic that her conversation must have been overheard. Meanwhile, the dark-haired girl explains that she tracked them both as they walked from the road into the park. The dark-haired girl had witnessed the moment Kisaki tried to warn him, her eyes missing nothing of the exchange. Finding herself cornered, Kisaki finally asks the pressing question. If all this is true, what is the real reason for this confrontation? She demands to know her true purpose as the air grows heavy between them. It's simple, the other girl claims, her expression unreadable as she stares back. Suddenly, the tension is broken by the arrival of Sakuraji. With a bright, beaming smile, she approaches, exclaiming that she has come specifically to offer her thanks, leaving Kisaki in a state of confusion. She beams with a radiant smile, her hands clasped together as she delivers the news that Kawatsuji confessed his feelings to her just yesterday, and they are now officially a couple. The revelation leaves the other girl speechless and visibly shaken by the sudden turn of events. Despite the attempt to interject, the joyful girl continues, expressing her gratitude and noting that regardless of any previous interference, the outcome was perfect and she couldn't be happier. She remains blissfully unaware of the tension, mentioning a strange conversation she had with him while her companion struggles to process the reality of the situation. This revelation strikes a chord deep within the dark-haired observer, whose gaze sharpens as she realizes the true intent behind the attempts to keep the boy at a distance. Softening her stance, she acknowledges the other girl's kindness, calling her Rinko and admitting that while things were complicated, the end result was acceptable. Leaning in with a quiet intensity, she explains that she had been prepared to take drastic measures the previous day, but since it proved unnecessary, she simply wanted to offer her thanks before departing. Far from this confrontation, the boy sits alone in his room, his attention fixed on a gruesome horror film playing on the television screen. His quiet evening is interrupted by the persistent buzzing of his phone, displaying a call from Rinko Fukumura, which prompts him to reflect on how even a dull movie can't dampen his current mood. He answers the call, only to find the girl on the other end sounding uncharacteristically somber as she offers him her contact information and a standing invitation to reach out if he ever finds himself in trouble. The conversation takes a sharp, chaotic turn when she suddenly erupts in a panicked shout, demanding to know why he is dating Sakuragi after she had explicitly warned him against it. He tries to soothe her over the phone, calling her by her first name, Rinko, which immediately sparks a flustered protest from the other end of the line. Because of this breach of formality, she snaps back, demanding he use her surname instead. She explains that a former classmate shared the name Fukumura, making the first name basis feel uncomfortably familiar. Shifting the conversation back to the matter at hand, she presses him for his reasons, questioning what could possibly drive him to date someone like Sakuragi when it clearly invites nothing but complication. He counters that the very trouble she warns of is what draws him in, explaining that Sakuragi possesses an unpredictable nature that makes it impossible for him to look away. This intensity is mirrored in his thoughts of Tokano, whose own fixated, dark-eyed gaze remains perpetually locked onto him. With a blush and a wide, earnest smile, he declares that Sakuragi offers him every ounce of her emotion, asking if that isn't the ideal quality in a partner, only to be met with a flat, immediate rejection of the idea. In response, she sighs, telling him that his logic is not only hard to follow but bordering on the bizarre. Realizing that her warnings are falling on deaf ears, she leans back in her chair, conceding that her attempts to intervene have been a complete waste of time. He offers a sincere word of thanks, reverting to her surname, Fukumura, and admitting that their talk helped him gain a better understanding of Tokano's perspective. Left alone with her thoughts, she stares at her phone, reflecting on how another's words echoed this sentiment, and concluding that, perhaps, the two of them are simply a perfect, if strange, match. She listens as he concludes their conversation, his voice steady as he explains that he has gathered the information he sought. He offers a casual farewell, ending the call with a simple promise to see her again soon. After the line goes dead, she stares at the screen of her device, the time displaying early evening. A heavy sigh escapes her as she admits to herself that she truly hopes her suspicions about the situation are wrong, her expression clouded with doubt. On the other end of the line, he lowers his phone, his gaze hardening with a newfound clarity. The sweat on his brow betrays the intensity of the exchange, yet his eyes remain fixed on a realization that has finally taken root. He begins to piece together the anomalies in her behavior, recalling how the questions he posed seemed intended for someone else entirely. The way she bristled at the mention of her own name and the subtle shift in her tone when discussing Tokano all point toward a single, unavoidable conclusion. She wasn't alone during their call. A faint, knowing smile touches his lips as the pieces of the puzzle click into place. Though he had initially resisted the idea, he can no longer deny the reality of the situation. Meanwhile, the two girls sit close together, their attention focused entirely on the glowing screen of the mobile device. The dark-haired girl leans in, her eyes wide with an unreadable intensity as she monitors the aftermath of the call. He had realized that she was using their mutual acquaintance to probe for the truth behind his recent confession. With this understanding, he had confronted her directly, asking if she was currently in the company of the very person they were discussing. He maintains a calm, resolute expression, asserting that every word he spoke during the call was the absolute truth. He emphasizes his sincerity, wanting there to be no doubt about the weight of his feelings. Clenching his hand over his chest, he speaks her name with a quiet, focused intensity. The gesture is one of profound conviction, anchoring his resolve as he acknowledges the depth of his connection to her. Having overheard everything, she looks down with a soft, contemplative smile, her cheeks flushed with a hint of color. While the revelation was unexpected, she now feels she truly understands his heart, leaving her companion slumped in the background, overwhelmed by the weight of the secret they now share. She realizes with a start that he had known all along. The moment the call connected, he must have sensed her presence on the other end. Rinko, sitting nearby, can only stare in unexpected silence at the revelation. Because of this, Rinko begins to explain her own doubts. She admits that while she was happy he confessed, the timing felt strange, leading her to worry about hidden motives. She had expected a more typical reaction, which is why she felt the need to test his sincerity. The girl, however, is overwhelmed by a sense of wonder, her face flushed as she realizes he saw right through her insecurities. To her, the fact that he went to such lengths to ease her worries feels like a beautiful, impossible dream. She collapses onto the soft surface of the bed, dismissive of any lingering doubts. Even when Rinko points out that he could have simply fabricated his words knowing she was listening, she remains unfazed. Lying there, she decides that being his priority is enough for the moment. Even if his words weren't entirely genuine, or if this feeling is only fleeting, she is content to be the one by his side for now. Meanwhile, Rinko struggles to grasp this logic, her expression clouded with confusion. She admits to a certain greed, a deep-seated desire to uncover the absolute truth of his feelings, even as she realizes she is out of her depth. As she watches the two of them in her mind's eye, she feels a profound sense of distance. They share a bond, a strange and specific connection that remains entirely alien to her. Despite her confusion, a small, resigned smile touches her lips. She concludes that if her friend can find solace and comfort in this arrangement, then perhaps that is all that truly matters. The atmosphere shifts as the girl sits up with renewed energy, declaring that it is time for girl talk, since Rinko is the only one she can truly confide in about him. It marks a turning point, the day they officially became a couple, and the day Rinko's quiet endurance began anew. Tokano approaches Kawatsuji at school, her eyes gleaming with a mix of anticipation and her usual intensity. She asks if she might visit his home after classes conclude for the day. He is caught off guard by the sudden request, his expression one of mild shock as he processes the idea of her entering his private space. As they sit together in the classroom, the conversation continues. She explains her reasoning, noting that since they were unable to spend time together the previous day, she wants their first official after-school date to be somewhere meaningful. The surrounding students go about their business, oblivious to the weight of her request. He reflects on their recent interactions, specifically a phone call where the sound of his voice seemed to have a profound effect on her. She confirms this, her gaze softening as she recalls hearing him through the receiver, a moment that clearly solidified her desire to be closer to him. Seeing her genuine enthusiasm, he eventually relents, agreeing to the visit if that is truly what she wishes. Her reaction is immediate and joyful. She clasps her hands together, her face lighting up with a rare, exuberant smile that contrasts with her typically somber aura. Later that afternoon, they walk toward his residence. He offers a humble warning, describing his home as nothing more than an ordinary, unremarkable place. She remains undeterred, humming a light tune and expressing a preference for seeing his life exactly as it is, without any special preparations. Reaching the front door, he inserts his key into the lock. With a final, hesitant remark, he turns the mechanism, the metallic click echoing in the quiet hallway as he prepares to invite her into his world. He steps inside and announces his arrival. From the interior of the house, his mother, Haruka, offers a warm and familiar greeting, her voice carrying the comfort of a routine afternoon. She appears from around a corner, still holding a vacuum cleaner from her chores. Her eyes widen in surprise as she realizes her son has not returned alone. She immediately becomes flustered, lamenting that she would have tidied the house further had she known a guest was expected. However, as she gets a clearer look at the girl standing in the entryway, her confusion turns to recognition. She calls out a name, Yumi, with a friendly smile. This leaves him utterly bewildered, his mind racing as he wonders why his mother would address Tokano by a completely different name. He sits in stunned silence as his mother recounts a chance encounter from 6 months prior. She explains how her bicycle had toppled over, leaving her helpless until a girl named Kisaki arrived to assist her, seemingly out of nowhere. As the story continues, his mother describes Kisaki as a wonderful, helpful girl they kept bumping into after that initial meeting. Tokano listens intently, a bead of sweat rolling down her face as the depth of the situation and Kisaki's calculated kindness becomes clear. Kisaki had apparently been quite charming during these encounters, noting the shared last name, but claiming she never realized the connection until much later. She had expressed her genuine surprise at discovering the woman she was helping was actually the mother of her classmate. He realizes with a sinking feeling that every one of those chance encounters was meticulously planned from the very beginning to win over his family. Beside him, Tokano wears a dark, knowing smile, marveling at the sheer audacity and commitment required for such a coincidence. She is privately impressed and slightly unsettled by the realization that her rival went so far as to target his parents to gain an advantage. It was a thorough strategy, leaving no base uncovered in the pursuit of her goals, which Tokano finds both shocking and admirable. Returning to the present, his mother breaks the tension by asking if they simply came over to hang out, noting with a curious look that it is a rare occasion for him to bring a girl home. He hesitates, his hand hovering near his face as he prepares to clarify the nature of their relationship. He finally finds his voice and introduces her properly, stating clearly that she is his girlfriend. Tokano stands beside him, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips as the official declaration is finally made in front of his family. The announcement sends his mother into a state of utter disbelief, her eyes wide as she struggles to process the news. A chaotic exchange follows, with him exasperated by her extreme reaction, while she frets over how this might affect Kisaki's feelings, given their history. She eventually settles into a playful mood, giggling as she teases her son about his unexpected romantic life. She admits that he never seemed like the type to have a girlfriend, but looks at him now with a newfound sense of amusement and pride. With a cheerful wave, she shoos the two lovebirds toward his room, insisting she won't stand in their way. He finds his mother's sudden, over-the-top consideration incredibly awkward as they make their retreat to the privacy of his bedroom. He listens with a strained expression as his mother leans in, whispering a final piece of advice about Kisaki being a good girl and needing care. He dismisses the suggestion immediately, his brow furrowed in irritation as he insists he doesn't need her input on the matter. Stepping further into the hallway, he watches his mother with a growing sense of unease, realizing with a sinking feeling that Kisaki has already managed to completely charm her. Nearby, Tokano lingers in the shadows, her presence a silent, watchful weight on the periphery of the conversation. The sensation of being trapped intensifies, manifesting as a vivid mental image of Tokano's slender arms wrapping around him while a massive spiderweb looms in the background. He shivers, the metaphorical silk of her influence feeling all too real as he contemplates the depth of the web he has wandered into. Meanwhile, Tokano has already begun her exploration, her eyes darting across the shelves and corners of his private sanctuary with an intense, almost predatory curiosity. Entering the room behind her, he finds her standing in the center of the space, looking around with wide-eyed wonder. When he dryly questions if his mundane bedroom is truly that fascinating, she turns to him with a bright, enthusiastic affirmation that leaves no room for doubt. She follows this with a playful yet unsettling remark, noting that even with her tendencies, this is the first time she has actually been allowed inside. He stares back, caught between a nervous sweat and a grimace, wondering if he is actually supposed to find her stalker-themed humor funny. Their awkward moment is interrupted by his mother's cheerful voice drifting through the door, announcing that she has prepared a spread of snacks for them. He sighs, noting to himself that his mother is clearly putting in far more effort than necessary to play the gracious host. He tells her to make herself comfortable and take a seat while he steps out to retrieve the refreshments. As the door creaks shut behind him, he leaves her alone in the quiet of his room. Left to her own devices, she stands perfectly still, her gaze fixed on the door where he just disappeared. Her expression is unreadable, a silent mask of intense focus that fills the empty room with a heavy, expectant atmosphere. Back in the kitchen, he finds his mother waiting expectantly by a table laden with food. When she eagerly asks how things are progressing between the two of them, he can only offer a flat, internal response, noting that they have barely even settled into the room yet. He is gripped by a sudden, chilling certainty that Tokano is plotting something in his absence. Beads of sweat form on his brow as he contemplates her true intentions, convinced that her presence in his room is far from innocent. Carrying a tray with tea and snacks, he lingers in the hallway, his mind racing through possibilities. He reasons that she wouldn't steal anything, but there must be a specific reason she was so insistent on entering his private sanctuary, perhaps searching for something he has overlooked. As he nears the door, his suspicions turn toward his computer, wondering if she is searching for some kind of information. He moves quietly, his footsteps muffled as he prepares to catch her in the act of whatever secret investigation she is conducting. With a sudden, forceful movement, he slams the door open, catching her completely off guard. She jolts in shock, her eyes wide and fixated as the sudden intrusion shatters the silence of the room and interrupts her private moment. She quickly tries to compose herself, expressing genuine surprise at how quickly he returned. Her breath hitches as she realizes her moment of privacy has been abruptly cut short, and she stares at him with an intensity that betrays her guilt. He immediately demands to know what she was doing, his gaze narrowing as he finds her perched on the edge of his bed. She stammers, her voice trailing off as she admits her focus was on the very place he sleeps, her hands resting tentatively on the sheets. In a startlingly blunt confession, she explains that she hadn't done anything significant yet, merely touching and sniffing the bedding to feel what it was like. He reacts with disbelief, questioning how she could possibly think such an intimate and invasive admission doesn't count as something wrong. She continues her strange logic, suggesting that the bed is the one place where he can truly be himself while asleep. He stares at her, utterly bewildered by her perspective and her lack of social boundaries, while she offers a hollow apology for her behavior. His eyes widen in sheer disbelief as she describes the bed as a sanctuary for letting go. She reaches out toward the sheets again, her expression intense and unreadable as she explains her fixation on the one place where he is most vulnerable. She admits to becoming lost in thought and burying her face in his bed because of how good it felt, wondering if he felt the same way about her. He can only plead with her to stop making such intimate, unsettling declarations with such a calm, unwavering expression. He sets the tray down with a soft clatter, his mind racing for a way to break the awkward silence. He admits his uncertainty, wondering aloud what they should actually do now that she is here. In response to his hesitation, she tells him not to worry so much, but he presses on, asking what her normal routine is when she spends time with friends. He confesses his total lack of experience in having a girl over to his room. He explains that his usual social activities involve whatever co-op games are popular at the moment. While he has a personal preference for horror titles, he usually suppresses that interest to accommodate others who might find them too intense. Her gaze drifts toward the gaming console, noting with a quiet confusion that the power is completely cut. She was certain she had left it in sleep mode the last time she was near it, but it sits dark and unresponsive. Sensing the shift in mood, he proposes an alternative, watching a movie. Knowing her penchant for cinema, he hopes this might be a more comfortable middle ground. He produces a collection of rented horror films, admitting that while some are likely masterpieces, others are probably low-budget duds. She lets out a soft, amused chuckle, agreeing that mocking the bad ones could be an entertaining way to pass the time. They settle into position before the screen, and with a quick press of the remote, the device hums to life. As the initial menus flicker across the screen, he points out a few details, his voice regaining some of its natural confidence. She watches him closely, a small, unreadable smile playing on her lips as she listens to him speak. A faint blush creeps across her cheeks as she maintains her fixated stare, her expression a complex mix of satisfaction and something far more intense. The room falls into shadow, leaving the two of them as mere silhouettes bathed in the cold, artificial glow of the television. She prepares to depart with Kawatsuji, offering a polite farewell and expressing her gratitude for the visit. Haruka, standing by the door in her apron, warmly encourages them to return whenever they like, her hospitality as bright as ever. As the teenagers step away, Yumi turns her attention to Haruka, teasingly calling her a rookie. She suggests that the mother still has much to learn about the nuances of hosting, leaving Haruka looking slightly sheepish under the critique. Continuing her lecture, she emphasizes that every experience, whether bitter or sweet, serves as a vital foundation for their shared history. With a confident hand to her head, she insists that the most important thing in this moment is simply making memories. The advice doesn't seem to provide much comfort to Haruka, who sighs at the lack of practical help. Yumi merely laughs it off, claiming that even a completely botched home date is just another part of the spice of life that makes things interesting. Meanwhile, the young guest approaches Yumi with a soft blush, confessing how much she treasures every moment spent with Kawatsuji. She adds that getting to see Yumi again was an unexpected highlight of the day, her hands clasped together in a show of sincerity. Deeply moved by the atmosphere of the home, she reflects on how fortunate Kawatsuji is to have such a kind and incredible mother. The group lingers in the hallway, the weight of her words touching everyone present as they stand together in a moment of quiet connection. The sentiment proves too much for Haruka, who suddenly lunges forward to pull the girl into a crushing, affectionate hug. She cries out about how sweet the girl is, while Kawatsuji and Kisaki watch the sudden outburst with a mix of surprise and bewilderment. Hidden from the other's view within the embrace, her expression shifts dramatically into a dark, satisfied smirk. Her eyes narrow with a chilling intensity, revealing a hidden layer of calculation beneath her previously innocent facade. Haruka eventually releases her, apologizing for the emotional display, while Kisaki whispers a cynical observation to Kawatsuji about the girl's motives. He tries to brush it off, though the seed of doubt has clearly been planted in his mind. He watches her as they prepare to leave, torn between his friend's warnings and his own desire to believe her. Despite the lingering suspicion, he can't deny that her words made him genuinely happy, leaving him questioning the true nature of her heart. He stands by as his mother bids farewell to the guests, her voice cheerful as she promises Kisaki her favorite dish next time. The door clicks shut, sealing the warmth of the home inside and leaving the two girls on the porch. As they step away from the entrance, Kisaki can't help but comment on the spectacle, teasing her companion about how much she seems to be enjoying the charade. She nudges for more details, curious about the sudden intimacy of the situation. Ignoring the chatter, the dark-haired girl focuses on the subtle weight of a small device tucked into her ear. Through it, the private conversations from within the house bleed through, voices discussing the speed of their courtship and the perceived cuteness that supposedly sparked such a rapid romance. She continues her walk in silence, a faint, knowing expression on her face as she listens to the sentimental reflections being shared behind closed doors. The irony of their special connection isn't lost on her, especially as she hears them marvel at the romantic nature of their meeting. Glancing down at the receiver in her hand, she notes the crackle of static beginning to interfere with the signal. The range is limited, a reminder that her window into their private world only extends so far from the source. Her mind drifts back to the moment of installation, recalling the careful selection of a listening device disguised as a mundane power adapter. It had been a calculated risk, ensuring the bug matched the existing hardware in the boys' room perfectly to avoid any suspicion from a casual glance. Straightening her school ribbon with a practiced grace, she concludes that the day's efforts were a resounding success. By cementing her status as his girlfriend in the eyes of his mother and her friend, she has secured a permanent foothold in his life, a vantage point from which she can slowly and surely uncover every secret he holds. Kawatsuji is trapped in a nightmare. Tokano looms over him, her words cryptic and chilling as she claims this is exactly what he desired. As she turns to leave, her voice echoing his name, he reaches out in a desperate, futile attempt to stop her. He bolts upright in bed, gasping for air as the morning sun filters through the window. The rhythmic chirping of birds outside offers a sharp contrast to the cold dread of the dream that still clings to him. His relief is short-lived, however, as a familiar face leans into his field of vision. Tokano greets him with a calm, unsettlingly pleasant morning greeting right there in his own bedroom. The boy stares back in stunned silence, his heart hammering against his ribs. She simply notes that he is finally awake, her presence as inexplicable as it is intrusive. Later at school, the atmosphere is deceptively normal. While classmates whisper about how relaxed she seems after her earlier antics, she approaches him with a polite request to share lunch, her hands clasped demurely in front of her. She had arrived at his house at dawn, using a clever ruse about early practice to gain entry, only to admit later that her true motive was simply to watch him sleep. Even more disturbing was the complicity of his own mother. Haruka had not only welcomed the girl into their home, but had playfully encouraged her to go upstairs and wake him herself. He finds himself more terrified by his mother's nonchalance than by the intrusion itself. As he sits in class, lost in thought, a voice breaks through his reverie, asking if his stalker-like companion is nearby. Sakuragi approaches the pair, her eyes lighting up with recognition. She strikes up a conversation with her former classmates, mentioning how long it has been since they were all together before her attention shifts toward Tokano. She introduces herself as Sakura Kooki, noting their shared history at Mitsuji Middle School. Tokano meets her gaze with a steady, polite response, acknowledging the introduction as they stand amidst the bustling school hallway. She stands in the hallway, listening as the other girl probes into her relationship with the boy they both know. Sakuragi's curiosity is piqued, wondering how the two of them could have possibly become close friends and suggesting they have been spending quite a bit of time together lately. In response, she delivers a blunt correction that leaves her companion reeling. They aren't just friends, they are dating. The revelation hits like a physical blow, leaving the other girl wide-eyed and shouting in utter disbelief. The news sends the girl into a frantic spiral of denial, her body trembling as she leans against the wall for support. She refuses to accept that the boy she once knew has moved on and started dating someone else. Seeing the disbelief, the girl begins to recount her own history, explaining that she has been the undisputed center of attention throughout her entire life, from kindergarten through middle school. She finds it hard to believe anyone could ignore her presence. She describes a life where she was always the priority, a natural charmer whom boys wanted and girls envied. It was a world where everyone followed her lead without question, and she was used to being the #1 priority for everyone around her. Catching herself in a self-centered rant, she notices her listener's glazed-over expression and demands attention. She shifts the story to middle school, recalling the moment she met the boy and how he was the first person to ever show zero interest in her, which frustrated her deeply. That perceived slight wounded her pride, leading her to set a singular goal. She would make him fall for her, simply to reclaim her dignity and prove her charm was universal. However, the plan backfired. Instead of conquering him, she found herself drawn to his unique nature, eventually falling for him because he lacked the crudeness of other boys and didn't treat her like a prize to be won. As the confession hangs in the air, she explains that his refusal to flatter her revealed an honest personality that was exactly what she had been searching for in a partner, making her feelings for him genuine. Despite the heartfelt admission, she leans in close, her eyes narrowing as she challenges the validity of the current relationship, stating firmly that she is still not convinced the two of them are actually dating. She continues her interrogation, questioning the validity of their supposed intimacy. She points out that a late bloomer, like him, wouldn't suddenly start dating a girl he barely knew upon entering high school, suggesting the other girl has the wrong idea entirely about their relationship. In response, the dark-haired girl stands her ground, asserting that he explicitly stated they were dating. Her rival simply lets out a skeptical "oh," while maintaining a smug, knowing expression that suggests she knows something the other doesn't. She pushes further, asking if there have been any kisses, hugs, or even a single gift exchanged between them. The silence that follows is heavy, as the other girl remains motionless, unable to provide an immediate answer to the pointed questions. After admitting that nothing physical has happened yet, she watches as her challenger triumphantly displays a hair scrunchie. The girl with the wavy hair claims this accessory proves her bond is deeper, explaining it was a gift from his mother, Haruka, which she views as a sign of true acceptance into his inner circle. Leaning in with a confident smirk, she adds that he even told her she was the first girl he had ever shared such an experience with, leaving her opponent visibly shaken and speechless by the implication of their shared history. As the dark-haired girl begins to walk away in silence, she can't help but laugh, mockingly commenting on how unimpressed she is by what she considers to be nothing more than hot air and empty claims of romance. She continues her verbal assault, bringing up the post-graduation party and questioning the true nature of their interactions during that pivotal time, her hand twitching with a nervous energy. The revelation causes the other girl to freeze in shock. Her rival points out that dragging him out to buy a graduation memento is hardly the same as receiving a genuine gift, exposing the forced nature of their outing and further undermining her confidence. She reflects on his personality, noting that he rarely resists things he doesn't actually care about. She wagers that even their first-name basis was something forced upon him rather than a natural progression of their relationship, painting him as a passive participant in her schemes. Just as the tension reaches its peak, the boy himself arrives, offering a casual wave. Despite his presence, she remains focused on her victory, insisting that she understands his true nature far better than the girl currently standing by his side. He has been the subject of her intense, secret scrutiny for a long time, a fact she reveals with chilling confidence while standing on the school stairwell. As she speaks, a flood of memories flashes through her mind. Moments of him in the hallway, on the stairs, and in the classroom, all captured by her watchful, predatory eyes. She continues her verbal assault, challenging the other girl's naive perception by asserting that he isn't nearly as pure or honest as she chooses to believe. Her voice remains steady as she explains that unlike others, she doesn't project fantasies onto him. She simply wants to understand his true nature, dismissing their supposed close relationship as nothing more than surface-level interactions. In response to this cold logic, the other girl's shoes squeak against the floor as she finally finds her voice, declaring that her only desire is to be his #1. She stands tall, her gaze unwavering as she explains that their relationship is defined by her absolute willingness to accept whatever role he requires of her. Their eyes meet in a silent, electric clash of wills, neither girl willing to back down from their conflicting devotions. Breaking the tension, she turns her back and begins to walk away, coolly informing her rival that any attempt at intimidation is a complete waste of time. The light-haired girl is left alone on the stairwell, staring down at her vibrating phone as a message arrives, her expression unreadable. Meanwhile, in the classroom, his own device buzzes with a notification, drawing his attention away from a mundane conversation with a classmate about test scores and his whereabouts. He stands in the school hallway, phone pressed to his ear as Sakuraji's voice crackles with frantic energy. She warns him that his girlfriend is completely unstable, suggesting that Tokano might even be wiretapping or filming his every move to keep track of his location. Despite the alarming accusations, he simply shrugs, his expression remaining remarkably composed. He admits that such behavior wouldn't actually surprise him, explaining that there is a sort of unspoken agreement between him and Tokano where overreacting would feel wrong. After ending the call and reassuring the girl on the other end that his mother, Haruka, is fine with the situation, he reflects on the inevitability of the current circumstances. It was always understood that his partner would resort to such extremes once they officially began dating, making her actions almost expected. Meanwhile, Sakuraji is left alone, her face contorted with a mixture of rage and disbelief. She feels isolated and betrayed, unable to comprehend how she has been so completely excluded from the inner workings of their strange relationship. Back in the school corridor, he spots Tokano waiting and calls out her name. She turns toward him, her usual stoic expression softening slightly as she acknowledges his presence. The two begin to discuss their plans for lunch, with the girl mentioning she was just about to give up on waiting for him. They weigh their options, considering whether to head to the canteen or find something else to eat before their time runs out. As they walk, she looks at him intently and asks if there is anything specific he requires of her. He pauses, caught off guard by her blunt offer of service. He realizes that he actually enjoys the way she surprises him, much like she did earlier that morning. He decides it's better not to give her specific instructions, as the way she reaches her own warped conclusions based on her honest desires is exactly what he finds compelling about her. Reassuring her, he tells her that she is perfectly fine exactly as she is, causing a small, rare smile to touch her lips. As they walk away together, the observation is made that the two of them are truly like two peas in a pod, perfectly matched in their own eccentric way. The boys gather in the classroom as the clock ticks toward 3, the air thick with the usual post-school chatter. Watarai leans back, his voice filled with a mix of confusion and awe as he remarks on how Tokano seemed different today, almost sparkling, and certainly cuter than he'd ever seen her. Because of this observation, the truth becomes undeniable. Her expression was unmistakable. It was the radiant, focused look of a young woman who had finally found love. In the changing area, he stands shirtless among his peers, speaking with a newfound, almost philosophical air about the warmth that comes from finding a special someone. His sudden expertise on the nature of womanhood draws a skeptical retort from one of the other boys, who questions where this sudden insight is coming from. As he pulls on his school shirt, the conversation continues, with Watarai turning to him directly. He asks if Haru has any insight into the strange change in the atmosphere, unaware of the revelation about to follow. He casually drops the bombshell that he confessed his feelings to her, and she accepted, leading them to officially start dating. The announcement hits the room like a physical blow, leaving his friends reeling in absolute shock as they shout in disbelief, unable to reconcile this new reality with the loveless Haru they thought they knew. Despite their frantic questioning, he remains remarkably calm, adjusting his tie while explaining that things simply clicked between them. His friends struggle to process the news, their confusion only growing as he treats the life-altering development as something perfectly natural. He then strikes a dramatic pose, shielding one eye as he declares that this turn of events can only be the work of fate. He speaks of a power so immense it shatters all established patterns and principles, fully embracing a theatrical persona. While he mutters the word fate, once more under his breath, his friends quickly dismiss the performance as a new comedic bit. They decide the dramatic gag actually suits him, even as they tell him his behavior is entirely uncalled for, leaving the group in a state of bewildered amusement. He chuckles softly, musing that what began as a fabrication has somehow transformed into a reality. Or perhaps, as he suggests with a knowing look, it was simply destiny. Beside him, the girl with the piercing gaze offers a faint, enigmatic smile, while their companion watches the exchange with a look of utter bewilderment. He listens as his friend notes how revitalized he appears, though the other boy confesses that the couple's unusual personal boundaries made their new status difficult to detect at first. He then mentions his own plans to meet with former classmates after school, predicting a wave of shock when the news of Haru's relationship finally breaks. Clapping a hand onto the shoulder of a bespectacled friend, he expresses surprise at their enduring social circle, as the other boy admits his own memories of middle school have already begun to fade. Their conversation is interrupted by a vibrant girl holding a handmade sign, announcing a reunion for their old middle school group and inviting everyone to join. Later, the focus shifts to the quiet hum of the school library, where a scanner beeps as books are processed under the names of the two new library monitors. Standing behind the counter, the young man politely dismisses a student, fulfilling his duties with a newfound sense of responsibility. Deep within the aisles of towering bookshelves, his partner stands alone, her expression uncharacteristically soft as she searches the high shelves. She reaches upward, her fingers straining to grasp a volume just beyond her reach, a small sound of frustration escaping her lips. Suddenly, a hand reaches over her shoulder to effortlessly retrieve the book, prompting her to turn in surprise as her boyfriend offers the text with a simple, quiet gesture of assistance. He stands amidst the quiet stacks of the library, accepting her gratitude with a light-hearted quip about her handling the next shift solo. She apologizes for not doing more, but he dismisses it, insisting they support one another. Reaching out, he gently takes an item from her hand, offering to put it back in its place as well. As he works, he notices her lingering gaze and asks what is on her mind, sensing a subtle shift in her mood. She admits that being in the library feels pleasant, a sentiment he acknowledges with a vague, thoughtful response while they stand surrounded by rows of books. Suddenly, she proposes an outing to a public library after school so they can share book recommendations and enjoy a quiet afternoon together. He is caught off guard and has to decline, explaining that he already committed to meeting his old middle school classmates, though he suggests they reschedule for another day. This rejection sparks a flash of internal conflict for her, as she silently questions why his friends would take precedence over his girlfriend. Her gaze intensifies as she confronts him with a heavy question, wondering if she truly holds the top priority in his life. Meanwhile, he reflects on his own transformation, recalling a time when life was a blur of boredom and he simply followed the crowd. Yet he can't help but notice how much more vibrant she has become recently. He finally understands that these small, individual connections are what give life meaning, even as he prepares to rejoin his old circle of friends. He tries to explain his feelings, telling her that meeting her has broadened his horizons and made him realize the importance of other aspects of his life, which he now wishes to value more deeply. In response, she looks down, her face obscured by a heavy shadow as she coldly asks for clarification, her voice laced with a sudden, chilling detachment. The boy is taken aback by her sharp tone as she accuses him of simply prioritizing others over her eyes wide with a growing sense of betrayal. She continues her verbal assault, asserting that if she truly mattered to him, she would be his sole focus and the only person he ever thought about, rather than anyone else. Her gaze becomes intense and dark as she questions why this is so difficult for him, reminding him that he had supposedly accepted her true nature. The school clock chimes in the background, punctuating the heavy silence between them. Despite her intensity, he remains firm, offering a quiet apology while maintaining that his commitment to his friends must come first today. He is left standing alone amidst the library shelves, the weight of the confrontation lingering in the silent air as she disappears from view. Later, the atmosphere shifts entirely as a group of students walks through the city, their cheerful chatter filling the streets after a successful outing together. Among them, Sakuragi laughs heartily, enjoying the company of her old friends while teasing Watarai about his place in their social circle. The group continues their stroll, with one of the boys noting how effortlessly Watarai has integrated into their long-standing group, despite being a newer addition. He walks alongside his friends as the group makes their way through the school hallway. Sakuragi notices a change in Haru's demeanor and asks if anything is wrong, but Haru quickly dismisses her concern, claiming everything is fine. She offers a warm, reassuring smile, insisting that she is always there to support him and that he shouldn't hesitate to reach out for help. Haru, feeling a sense of relief, offers a genuine smile in return and quietly thanks her for the support. His moment of peace is interrupted by the sharp vibration of his phone. As he pulls the device from his pocket, a look of genuine surprise crosses his face, catching the attention of Sakuragi, who pauses and looks back with a questioning gaze. She stares intently at her screen, having just sent a message asking for a moment to talk. Her expression is one of grim determination as she waits for a response, questioning if this is truly the right course of action. She sits quietly at a cafe table, her eyes downcast and filled with a lingering sadness. She expresses her gratitude to Rinko for simply listening to her troubles, insisting that no further action was necessary and that the act of being heard was enough. She remains unconvinced, her sharp eyes fixed on her companion as she admits to having her own unresolved thoughts on the matter. Considering her own past experiences with such intense fixations, she suggests that her unique perspective might actually make her the ideal person to intervene in the situation. Her gaze darkens, a flicker of something intense and perhaps dangerous crossing her features as she processes the offer. After a long pause, she finally yields, softly thanking Rinko and accepting the mysterious proposal. Kisaki reflected on the mounting tension between herself, Tokano, and Haruka, realizing that the only way to get clarity was to reach out to Kawatsuji directly. Finding themselves in the neon-lit confines of a karaoke room, he navigated the digital song selection screen, acknowledging that while it wasn't ideal, it was the only place they could speak without being overheard. As they settled into the booth, she observed that his meeting with Tokano had prompted him to seek her out, though he was quick to clarify that his motives weren't so simple. He let out a frustrated sigh as she suggested that Tokano might be orchestrating events behind the scenes, a possibility that clearly unsettled him. With a sharp, knowing glint in her eyes, she leaned in, telling him that he was free to keep his suspicions to himself if he preferred. She then rose from her seat, her expression hardening as she declared that her actions were her own and that she remained indifferent to whether she was being manipulated by others. Her thoughts drifted back to the sight of a visibly troubled Tokano earlier that day, explaining that this concern was what drove her to hear his side of the story. Suddenly, she gripped the microphone and announced her autonomy to the room, prompting him to wonder why she felt the need to broadcast such a personal declaration. He watched her, the weight of her words sinking in as he began to grasp the complex web of intentions surrounding them. He acknowledges the unfairness of the situation, agreeing that having plans derailed by someone else's whims is a natural cause for frustration. Kisaki sits across from him in the cramped karaoke booth, the weight of their conversation hanging in the air as they navigate the complexities of their shared social circle. She questions why he didn't simply accept the more troubling aspects of Tokano's personality for what they were, suggesting that applying common sense to their unconventional relationship is a futile effort. He admits that he rushed into things without fully understanding the depth of the situation, but now, the reality of it is finally starting to sink in. He leans forward, his expression hardening with a new sense of purpose as he declares his desire to become the person she hates the most. The sudden intensity of his words leaves Kisaki momentarily speechless, her eyes widening in surprise at his unexpected resolve to match Tokano's intensity. In his mind, he sees himself bound and vulnerable, a puppet to her whims, yet he remains steadfast in his indifference toward whatever she might do to him. He realizes that while he is willing to endure her actions, he refuses to be led blindly into a trap without understanding the strings being pulled. He grips his tie, the fabric bunching under his fingers as he explains his need to experience the raw, unfiltered force of her emotions. His goal is to become an obstacle in her path, forcing her to both love and hate him with equal fervor, ensuring he is never ignored. He stands and takes hold of the microphone, his voice steady as he proclaims that if he gives his all and still fails, he would accept becoming her subordinate without complaint. Kisaki watches him, noting how he seems to be embracing the idea of being swallowed up by the situation, much like she has in the past. She looks at him with a mix of confusion and skepticism, prompting him to admit that the terms he's using are messy and perhaps a bit misleading. He struggles to find the right words to articulate the complex, almost obsessive dynamic he's seeking to establish. He decides to address the elephant in the room, bluntly asking if she was once Tokano's girlfriend. The question cuts through the tension of the karaoke room, forcing a direct confrontation with their shared history and the nature of Kisaki's involvement. She recoils in genuine shock, her face flushing as she vehemently denies the suggestion, insisting they were nothing more than friends. He watches her reaction, realizing that simple labels like friends or lovers fail to capture the true, messy nature of the bond they all share. He offers a small, knowing smile, explaining that despite her protests, they are fundamentally the same. In this moment of shared understanding, the barrier between them seems to thin, revealing a common ground built on their mutual obsession with the same girl. He continues his analysis, suggesting that Tokano's feelings for him and Kisaki are fundamentally the same, regardless of what she claims to want from each of them. Seeking a deeper understanding, he asks her to share any lasting impressions or advice on how to handle the enigmatic girl. She drifts back into her memories, recalling the first time she saw the girl who would become her fixation, struck immediately by her haunting beauty. She found the speed of their connection strange. Before she realized it, their eyes had met and a conversation had already begun. Their burgeoning closeness didn't go unnoticed by their peers, who marveled at how she had managed to befriend the notoriously solitary and distant beauty. Her friends teased her playfully, jokingly asking what kind of spell she had cast to win over someone so unreachable. The girl herself eventually approached her in the hallway, asking for a private moment of her time. With a gaze that was both intense and vulnerable, she made a startling request, asking if she could be the most important person in her life. Yet, even then, she harbored a hidden, contradictory resolve. While seeking to be the center of one person's world, her true aim was to claim that singular spot in the heart of another. She concludes her story by explaining to him that the girl is driven by a singular, overwhelming obsession with being number one in the eyes of those she chooses. She watches him closely, asking if her revelations have sparked any new ideas. He sits in silence for a moment, processing the weight of Tokano's obsession with being number one and how it has shaped their lives. With a sudden, sharp smack of his fist against his palm, he declares his resolve to confront this situation head-on, even if it means a metaphorical battle of wills. The girl across from him is taken aback by his sudden display of determination. He admits to himself that he has a tendency to mask his true feelings with a smile, but now understands that he must confront Tokano with the full intensity of his emotions. His primary concern remains whether this course of action will truly provide the help his companion needs. She points out a subtle shift in his behavior, noting that he has begun using Tokano's actual name instead of the detached labels he once preferred. Reflecting on her own choices, she confesses that her use of a specific name was born from a place of fear and an inability to handle the overwhelming nature of Tokano's affection. Despite the complexity of their history, she maintains a genuine desire for her friend's happiness. He listens intently, recognizing the strength it takes for her to still hold on to that bond after everything that has transpired. A dark realization flickers through his mind, a sense that he, too, might have been consumed by the same overwhelming force that once gripped his companion. The memory of Tokano's presence feels almost physical, like a shadow looming over his thoughts. She clarifies that her choice of address is more than just a name. It is a declaration of her intent to face the past and the person who defined it. Though she worries she might be overstating her resolve, the need to confront the situation is undeniable. Turning the decision back to him, she acknowledges that the path forward is ultimately his to choose. She admits to leveraging his actions to find her own way back to a sense of normalcy and connection with their mutual acquaintance. He stares down at the bill on the table, acknowledging that this entire plan is a massive gamble with no guaranteed outcome. The weight of the decision settles over him as the conversation draws to a close. Elsewhere, the subject of their discussion walks alone, pausing as if sensing a sudden shift in the atmosphere. While she wonders at the strange sensation, he remains resolute in his decision, believing that this direct approach is the only way to truly face her and the complex reality of their bond. She watches him through the cold grid of the chain-link fence, her piercing gaze locked onto him as he delivers the final, crushing blow. With a look of unwavering resolve, he repeats his demand, stating clearly that he wants to end their relationship. The air between them grows heavy with the weight of his words, leaving no doubt that he is deadly serious about this separation. Fukumura approaches Tokano in the school hallway, her expression bright as she suggests they spend time together after classes. Nearby, Kisaki watches the exchange, her mind racing with questions about what Tokano is searching for, though she tries to convince herself it doesn't matter. This memory of a boy's sudden confession on the way to school feels distant and interchangeable, a mere example of the shallow love at first sight that others seem to experience so easily. Looking into the eyes of those around her, she comes to a somber realization. She will never truly be the most important person in their lives, the number one they prioritize above all else. When she met a new classmate, a girl with a cheerful smile and a friendly greeting, a possessive thought immediately took root, a desperate desire for this person to belong to her and her alone. However, the weight of her intense emotions proved too much for Rinko-chan to bear, leading to a painful rejection. The memory of a harsh, grating voice telling her that her very existence was depressing still stings, fueling her current sense of isolation. Then she encountered him, a boy whose gaze was devoid of the usual spark, his expression masked by a hood as he dismissed a cruel prank with cold indifference, his eyes appearing completely empty. Seeing that profound emptiness, she felt a surge of hope. If he was truly that hollow and detached, perhaps there was finally a space where she could become someone's number one without being pushed away. They stand together on the school roof, the chain-link fence a stark backdrop to their quiet meeting as the wind brushes past them, the distance between them filled with unspoken tension. She turns her gaze away, reflecting on the difficulty of finding someone who can accept the true depth of her nature without being overwhelmed by the intensity of her need for connection. Watching him now, she resolves to suppress her more intense impulses. She figures that this time, she will try to be normal and keep her feelings from becoming overbearing, hoping to finally sustain the bond she craves. She stands before him, her voice trembling as she reminds him that he was the one who confessed, even after learning the depths of her obsession and what he was getting himself into. In response, his hand tightens into a fist as he demands to know why he isn't her top priority, questioning why she would lead him on if she didn't truly see him as the only one in her world. Tears well up in her eyes, spilling over as she cries out that he should have simply rejected her from the very beginning if he wasn't prepared for her intensity. He bows his head, the weight of his own deception heavy on his shoulders, and offers a quiet apology, admitting that the fault lies with him for trying to force a normal relationship when they were anything but. Continuing his confession, he admits that his initial interest wasn't born of romance, but rather a desperate hope that her unpredictable nature would provide an escape from his own crushing boredom. As she stares at him in stunned silence, he explains that he only chose to confess because he feared she would leave if he didn't find a way to keep her close, even if it meant lying about his feelings. Standing apart on the rooftop, he suggests that perhaps this is the right moment to end their flawed, mutually destructive connection before things get even worse. However, his gaze softens as he looks back at her, declaring his new intention: to make her his number one in a way that is finally genuine and honest. He stands his ground, making it clear that while he won't be a mindless puppet to her whims, he refuses to turn away from her, no matter how much they might clash or how many times it takes to understand one another. With a firm hand pressed against his chest, he challenges her to break him if she must, promising that he can endure whatever she throws at him because that is what it truly means to be his priority. He stands before her, admitting his uncertainty about where this path leads. He muses that she might eventually consume his identity with her own, or perhaps she will simply grow weary of his presence. Despite these doubts, he places a hand over his heart and formally asks her to be with him again, fully embracing the twisted nature of their bond. As they walk away from the rooftop, the reality of their situation settles in. While their bond is far from conventional, the lack of normalcy is of no concern to either of them. While they walk, her gaze remains fixed, a silent intensity brewing behind her eyes as she processes his words. She wipes a stray tear from her face, a small gesture of relief as she admits to herself that her previous assumptions were incorrect. She had once believed that pushing him to such emotional extremes would drive him away or make their connection unbearable. With a firm step forward, she realizes that hesitation is no longer necessary, even in the face of potential rejection. Leaning in close until their faces nearly touch, she wears a chillingly determined smile, vowing that she will never let him go, regardless of what he might say in the future. As she finishes her vow, they begin walking side by side once more, and he resolves to earn her genuine affection, feeling a sense of lightness now that their mutual intensity is out in the open. While he tries to maintain his composure, she playfully claims him as her own servant, prompting a lighthearted protest from him while their friend watches their strange dynamic with a mix of confusion and amusement. She stands before him, the chain-link fence of the rooftop framing their encounter. He extends a hand, his expression resolute as he challenges her to accept the terms of their new, unconventional bond. He explains his desire to formalize this transition, describing the gesture as a declaration of intent, a term borrowed from their mutual friend. The weight of his words leaves her momentarily stunned, her eyes widening in a mix of confusion and dawning realization. She gazes at the offered hand, the silence between them stretching across the open rooftop. Finally, she reaches out, her fingers curling around his in a firm, deliberate handshake that seals their pact. They stand in silhouette against the bright sky, a quiet moment of connection amidst the complexity of their shared history. Suddenly, she recoils, her face flushing as she breaks the contact. He watches her, puzzled by the sudden shift in her demeanor and asking what has caused her distress. She admits to herself that this was the first time their skin had actually met, an observation that brings a wave of unexpected embarrassment. He remains silent, his gaze fixed on her as the gravity of that simple touch settles over them both. A strange sensation takes hold of her, a phantom strike against her chest that resonates deep within her heart. In this moment, she understands that their true journey together is only just beginning. A metallic click echoes as the shackles lock into place. In the quiet of the room, the philosophical weight of the situation hangs heavy. While everyone holds their own perspective, the ultimate question remains whether the journey or the destination holds more significance. He lies spread-eagled on the bed, his wrists bound firmly to the frame by the cold steel. Despite the restraint, his expression is one of detached curiosity rather than fear, contemplating the inevitable moment when the metaphorical brakes finally fail. Looking up from his captive position, he sees her, his girlfriend, Rinko, gazing down with a serene, almost angelic smile. The The contrast between her gentle expression and his current predicament prompts him to reflect on the bizarre sequence of events that led to this moment. The memory shifts back to a more mundane setting outside the Tsukino Cafe, where the air was filled with talk of the upcoming Golden Week. Even then, there was an underlying acknowledgement that the path they were walking was far from conventional. Seated across from him in a cozy booth, she had leaned forward with an idea, suggesting they catch a new horror movie or find somewhere special to go. The atmosphere was light, a stark contrast to the intensity that would later follow. He had countered with suggestions of his own, mentioning haunted houses or other eerie locations that might provide the thrill they both seemed to crave. She listened intently, her cheeks flushing slightly as the possibilities of their shared interests unfolded. Setting his cup down with a deliberate clack, he had looked her in the eye and insisted that they should prioritize her desires. He didn't want her to simply accommodate his eccentricities. He wanted to know what truly moved her. She paused, the question hanging in the air as she repeated his words softly to herself. Her gaze became distant, her mind clearly racing with thoughts she hadn't yet dared to voice. A dark, playful energy seemed to take hold of her as she admitted her primary goal was his happiness, yet she confessed a growing desire to be the source of his fear herself. Her breath hitched with a mix of excitement and nerves as she considered the shift in their dynamic. Leaning in closer, she whispered a final, provocative thought about what he might do to her if he were really trying. The curiosity in her voice was palpable, marking a turning point in their strange, escalating game. She leans forward in the cafe booth, her dark eyes fixed on him as she asks exactly how much freedom she has in their arrangement. He meets her gaze steadily, promising not to impose any restrictions and challenging her to give him everything she has. Because of that agreement, he now finds himself spread-eagled on a bed, his wrists bound to the headboard. He dryly questions if this is her standard way of treating guests, but she counters that it is quite strange for someone to simply allow themselves to be tied up like this. The young woman stands over him with a cryptic, satisfied smile, leaving him to wonder what her next move could possibly be. He watches her closely, trying to decipher the intent behind her silent, amused expression. Suddenly, she strikes a dramatic pose, pointing a finger at him and declaring that his inability to move is truly terrifying. He stares back, a realization dawning on him that perhaps she hadn't actually planned anything beyond the initial restraint. She begins to explain that they are in her older sister's former room, which has been empty since she moved out in the spring. He finds the sparse, quiet space unsettling, noting that her attempt at being scary isn't quite landing. As she stands there, she suddenly remembers a crucial detail, while he reflects on his initial worry that her clumsy nature might ruin the atmosphere of the situation. Without warning, she lunges toward him, her hands reaching for his torso as the bed frame creaks under her weight. He gasps in surprise, demanding to know what she is doing as she looms over his restrained form. Instead of an assault, she begins to unlock the restraints, explaining that since he is still in his school uniform, she will allow him to change into something more comfortable. He watches, stunned, as she produces the key and frees his hands. After setting down a bag of clothes, she turns to leave the room, mentioning she will go fetch some drinks while he gets settled. He sits up, bewildered by this sudden shift toward hospitality and generosity. He closes his eyes, processing the irony of the situation. He had fully expected her to take advantage of his helplessness or watch him all day, yet here she is, telling him to undress and change in private. He watches as she suddenly recoils, her face flushing a deep crimson as she exclaims at the perceived boldness of the situation. Her fingers twist together nervously, the girl's mind racing as she reminds herself that they have only ever held hands, making the current intimacy feel overwhelming. Turning her back to him to hide her embarrassment, she explains that while she might have brushed against him while securing the restraints, she had tried to be as respectful as possible, insisting they take their relationship slowly. He stares at her in disbelief, struggling to reconcile her sudden display of modesty with the fact that she had just kidnapped and bound him. The house stands quiet as she finally retreats from the room, calling out a final offer of assistance and leaving him to change into the provided clothes. Alone now, he examines the loungewear, noting with a mix of confusion and unease that the garments seem to be exactly his size, wondering how she could have known his measurements so precisely. He sighs, the tension of the previous moments giving way to a strange sense of anticlimax as he admits to himself that he had expected something more dramatic to happen. His train of thought is abruptly broken when he catches a glimpse of a shadow moving behind the door, a single eye peering through the narrow gap. As he moves toward the entrance, the door is suddenly slid shut with a sharp rattle, leaving him standing in silence and wondering who else might be in the house. Before he can react, the door flies open again and a figure lunges at him, pinning him to the floor with a sudden, heavy thud. She had vanished as quickly as she appeared, leaving him alone to process the encounter. He reaches out, poking the soft, yielding surface of an inflatable doll, startled to find it is the inflatable variety. The boy stares at the crude face drawn upon the plastic, noting with horror the rope tied tightly around its neck. A chilling realization begins to take hold. If this effigy is meant to represent him, the implications are deeply unsettling. He breaks into a cold sweat as he considers the possibility that she has been using this surrogate for some kind of training. The thought of what she might intend to do to him personally, given the violent state of the doll, sends a shiver down his spine. Suddenly, a heavy footfall echoes from the hallway, snapping him out of his dark ruminations. He turns toward the door, his heart racing as the sound of someone approaching grows louder. A firm knock follows, accompanied by Rinko's voice asking if he has finished changing. The mundane question contrasts sharply with the disturbing discovery he just made, leaving him momentarily paralyzed. She stands in the doorway, a tray in hand and a faint, unreadable smile on her face. He watches her warily, wondering just how far she is willing to go and realizing there is only one way to find out as she asks for permission to enter. Kisaki and Haru are bound together by a pair of cold, steel handcuffs, a physical manifestation of their twisted connection. She wears a sly, knowing smile, relishing the forced intimacy of their alone time as they stand side by side in their school uniforms. Later, back at the house, she stands before a closed door, her back to the world as she seeks entry into his private sanctuary. Dressed in an oversized hoodie, she calls out softly, asking for permission to enter the room. Inside, he hears the distinct, metallic click of the door handle being turned. He responds with a quiet, almost detached affirmation, his gaze fixed forward as he waits for her to step through the threshold. She enters the room carrying a tray of rice crackers, her tone light and domestic as she asks if she kept him waiting. He assures her that the wait was of no consequence, though the mundane nature of the exchange feels strangely at odds with the tension in the air. As she moves to set the snacks down on a nearby surface, her words trail off into a sudden silence. The simple act of offering food is abruptly interrupted by a jarring discovery that catches her completely off guard. The discovery leaves her breathless as he stands over the motionless form of the intruder lying bound on the floor. He acknowledges that the secret is out, his voice calm as he questions if she will try to ignore the grim reality now laid bare before her. She stares in stunned silence as he looks down at the body with a chilling sense of detachment. He laments the situation, stating that their previous plans are now moot, though he admits he had truly wanted to hear her answer before things reach this point. He swallows hard, his jaw tightening as she demands to know what he intends to do next. The atmosphere in the room thickens, heavy with the weight of his impending decision and the dark path they are now walking together. Instead of the confrontation he expected, she suddenly drops into a deep, submissive bow, her hands pressed together in a desperate plea for forgiveness. The unexpected gesture of apology leaves him utterly bewildered, his confusion mirroring the chaotic shift in their dynamic. She continues her explanation, her voice soft as she admits that his previous declaration, that he would take everything from her, compelled her to reciprocate with equal intensity. Recounting her preparations, she describes how she acquired a lifelike practice figure to refine her technique, seizing the opportunity while her parents were away for the evening. Her dedication bordered on obsession as she spent hours contemplating the most effective methods, even drawing inspiration from the macabre scenes in his favorite horror films. However, a sudden realization struck her. Mere recreations of cinematic tropes would be predictable and hollow, lacking any true impact or meaning. This led to her final, desperate gambit, leaving the bound figure for him to discover, hoping his own mind would fill in the terrifying blanks that a simple doll could not. Bowing her head slightly, she offers a sincere apology for failing to live up to her own grand ambitions and for the perceived inadequacy of her efforts. Despite the outcome, she maintains that the labor itself held value, a sentiment he quickly validates by assuring her that she hasn't disappointed him in the slightest. A gentle smile touches his lips as he recognizes the sheer amount of time and energy she invested in this elaborate trial, seeing it as a profound expression of her devotion. Overwhelmed by his unexpected kindness, her cheeks flush a deep crimson as she struggles to find the words for her next request. She then produces a pair of cold, steel handcuffs, offering them as a humble token of her gratitude, even as the memory of her earlier doubts about pale imitations lingers in the air. She looks up in surprise as Haru offers his full cooperation, promising to help with anything he can, before he asks if there is anything else she has been wanting to try. Her eyes widen, searching his face for any sign of hesitation as she asks if he truly means anything at all. He meets her gaze steadily, reasoning that her need for confirmation signals the importance of the request and reaffirms his commitment. With a sudden burst of energy, she gestures toward the bed, instructing him to take a seat. As he settles onto the edge of the mattress, she explains that her only request is for him to remain in the room, a simple demand that leaves him visibly perplexed. She leans in, her expression shifting into a mask of intense, unblinking focus that causes him to recoil slightly as he asks for further instructions. The room falls into a heavy silence, with him fidgeting uncomfortably under the weight of her unwavering attention. He eventually tries to break the tension by eating a small snack, but she remains motionless, her eyes never leaving him. The boy eventually looks away, unable to maintain eye contact with the girl who has become a silent sentinel. For the next several hours, until the sun begins to set, she does nothing but stare, her obsession reflected in the very pupils of her eyes as she watches his every breath. She stands there, a soft blush coloring her cheeks as she reflects on the hours spent together. With a gentle, almost shy expression, she confesses that simply being in his presence was more than enough, the absolute best she could have hoped for. Haru, preparing to leave, asks if they have everything, to which she confirms with a quiet, "Yeah," cherishing the lingering warmth of the afternoon. She watches as he stands at the threshold, offering a final, sincere thanks for the time they shared. With a simple promise to see her at school, he steps away, leaving the quiet intensity of their encounter behind as he begins his journey home. Upon returning to his own house, the boy is met with a cheerful greeting from his mother. She seems surprised by his early return, playfully suggesting that he could have just stayed over, a comment that catches him off guard and hints at her remarkably relaxed approach to his social life. The young man finds himself flustered by her casual attitude, muttering that her liberal parenting is perhaps a bit too extreme. As he heads toward his room, He grumbles a request for her to consider how her words might sound to others before speaking so freely, his embarrassment clear in his hunched shoulders and averted gaze. He can't escape as she repeats his own words back to him with a knowing, mischievous smile. She finds amusement in his flustered reaction, clearly enjoying the chance to tease him about the plenty of fun he had without needing to stay the night. While she remains at home, he finds himself on the phone later that evening, his expression bright and animated as he shares his thoughts with a trusted friend. He speaks with a newfound appreciation, noting that Kisaki is truly at her best when she isn't trying to be anything other than herself, his voice filled with a warmth that he struggles to contain. While he continues to speak, the girl on the other end of the line listens patiently as he desaboffos his feelings. He admits that he's only sharing this because she is the only one who truly understands that side of Kisaki, confessing that he spent much of the afternoon sitting in awkward silence while his mind raced with these realizations. Not long after, she finds herself in the awkward position of relaying those very same sentiments directly to Kisaki. She admits with a nervous sweat that it feels incredibly strange to gush about such things, yet she feels compelled to pass on the message, even as she wonders how her friend will react to hearing Haru's heartfelt praise. The teacher stands at the front of the classroom, announcing the day's activity, a random seat change. He instructs the students to draw numbers from a box, explaining that those with specific needs, such as eyesight issues, can request to sit at the front before the process begins. Following his instructions, the students line up to determine their new positions. One by one, they reach into the cardboard box, pulling out small slips of paper that will dictate where they spend the rest of the term. Against all odds, the draw places the two of them side by side. She rests her chin on her hands, a subtle, knowing smile playing on her lips as she gazes at him, while he remains characteristically stoic, accepting the outcome with a simple acknowledgement of the new arrangement. He can't help but feel a prickle of suspicion, wondering if this arrangement is truly the work of chance. While it isn't impossible, the likelihood of them being paired together again feels far too high to be a mere coincidence, and he watches the rest of the class settle in with a wary eye. Across the room, another student shares this sense of unease. He stares intently at the seating chart, his sharp eyes narrowing as he senses that something about this random switch is fundamentally off, though he keeps his thoughts to himself for the moment. His suspicions are mirrored by the boy at the center of the change, who tries to play it cool by suggesting to her that their proximity is just a stroke of luck. She, however, seems far more convinced that their placement next to each other is far too convenient to be accidental, her expression unreadable. Ultimately, he decides there is no point in dwelling on the mystery. They settle into their new desks, the classroom buzzing with the energy of the new arrangement as the students prepare for the next lesson, the seating chart now a fixed reality. Later, the conversation shifts to the upcoming gym period. A group of boys gathers around a desk, discussing the start of softball matches and their desire to practice for the looming ball game competition instead of following the standard curriculum, their voices filled with competitive anticipation. Their friend joins in with a burst of energy, declaring her intent to double dribble her enemies into the ground. This prompts a confused exchange between the boys, who clarify their respective roles in soccer and basketball while questioning her understanding of the rules, much to her playful indifference. As the group disperses, the dark-haired boy approaches her to express his gratitude. He thanks her sincerely for securing the limited edition official merchandise he had been seeking, and she accepts his thanks with a polite, quiet acknowledgement, the transaction having been completed successfully. He continues his long-winded explanation about the ethics of anime merchandise, worried that an adult buying items aimed at young girls might be seen as predatory or unfair to the core audience. Kisaki cuts through his rambling with a polite but firm acknowledgement, noting that she is actually the one who owes him a debt of gratitude for his assistance. Turning her attention away from the student, she approaches the teacher to express her appreciation for his cooperation regarding the recent seating changes. The man appears visibly shaken, a bead of sweat rolling down his face as he listens to her calm, measured words, clearly uncomfortable with the nature of their interaction. The true nature of the random draw is laid bare. A simple false bottom in the box allowed the instructor to manipulate the outcome, ensuring Kisaki received the specific seat she desired next to Haru. She reflects on how her own natural performance during the draw prevented any of her classmates from suspecting the calculated deception. As she prepares to depart, she offers a final, chilling reassurance, promising that their secret arrangement will remain strictly between the two of them. The teacher can only watch in silence as she slides the door shut, his hand trembling slightly on the frame as the weight of their shared secret sinks in. She walks down the hallway with a knowing smirk, musing that the man likely tells himself he was blackmailed just to ease his own conscience. It is a convenient lie that allows him to play the victim in a scheme he actively facilitated to protect his own reputation. Left alone in the quiet corridor, the instructor stands motionless, the weight of his complicity settling over him like a heavy shroud as he stares blankly into the distance. He pulls out his phone, his mind racing as he tries to understand how a student could have discovered his private collection of figurines. The memory of his hidden hobby, tucked away in a glass cabinet, feels like a vulnerability she exploited with surgical precision. Elsewhere, the atmosphere is far more volatile as a hot-headed student named Kitchen declares his intent to sabotage the upcoming softball game. He is fueled by a righteous fury, determined to use the match as an opportunity to strike back at the boy from Kawatsuji's class. He slams his fist against a locker, venting his frustration over the perceived betrayal of a girl they all admire. To him, it is an insult that Haru would pursue another relationship when someone as perfect as Oki-chan already held feelings for him. Despite the presence of the girl in question, he continues his aggressive posturing, even going so far as to plan a physical assault with a baseball. He justifies his violent intent with a twisted sense of chivalry, claiming he will cover the medical expenses as long as he gets his revenge. He trembles with a visceral, uncontained fury, his fists clenched as he spits out his disdain for the boy he intends to target. To his companion, he admits that the sheer lameness of the other's excuses is what drives his desire to inflict pain during the upcoming game. As the two boys continue their heated exchange in the quiet school hallway, they are suddenly interrupted by a calm, feminine voice requesting more details. The sound of approaching footsteps stops them in their tracks, drawing their attention to a figure standing just out of sight. The intruder is revealed to be the dark-haired girl, who stares them down with an unnerving intensity. She demands an explanation for their behavior, catching them off guard when she mentions a specific online persona they thought was private. She holds up a mobile device, displaying a series of aggressive social media posts under the handle Orange Machi. The boys' faces pale as they see the very threats they had just been discussing mirrored on the screen, realizing their digital footprint has been discovered. Ignoring his attempt to deflect, she remains unfazed as he asks in a defensive challenge if she is accusing him of being the owner of the account. She simply points out that the posts clearly reflect a deep-seated grudge held by someone within their own school. She then begins a methodical breakdown of how digital anonymity is an illusion, explaining that a trail of personal interests, relationship details, and even background photos makes it trivial to identify a user. The boys stand frozen, listening to her explain how easily their private lives can be mapped out through their own careless sharing. Her tone shifts slightly as she reflects on the history of the account, noting that while the current posts are filled with bitter complaints, the older entries from middle school revealed a much more sensitive, perhaps even poetic, soul. She looks down at her phone, her expression unreadable as she prepares to delve deeper into the past. She begins to recite the melodramatic prose from those earlier years, speaking of the weight of time and the futility of looking toward the future. The words, once intended to be profound, now hang in the air with a cringeworthy weight that fills the hallway. As she continues her merciless reading, the boy is overwhelmed by the sheer embarrassment of having his past edgy thoughts exposed, clutching his head in agony. Unable to bear the exposure any longer, he turns and bolts down the corridor, leaving his confused friend behind. Even as he flees, she continues her relentless recitation, her voice echoing with the dramatic lines about the knight being cast as a villain. His companion, left behind in the wake of the chaos, can only ask in bewilderment what else she knows, watching in stunned silence as she remains focused on her reading. She stands alone in the school corridor, her gaze fixed on the retreating figures of the boys she just confronted. The weight of the encounter lingers in the quiet air of the hallway as she processes the aftermath of her intervention. Later, on the dusty baseball diamond, the atmosphere is far from quiet as a coach barks at a crouching catcher named Sawada. A ball thuds into the dirt, a wild pitch that draws immediate criticism for its lack of control and focus. The boy, Sawada, trembles visibly, his face flushed with embarrassment as he stammers out an apology. He blames his nerves for the slip-up, while his teammate impatiently demands he just throw the ball within reach, reminding him they are playing without bases on balls. Watching the struggle, Haru stands nearby with a bat resting against his shoulder, his expression clouded by a different kind of anxiety. He admits to a lingering fear that his own swing might accidentally injure someone, a concern that seems to weigh heavily on his mind despite the casual setting. As the day winds down, he and Kisaki wait together at the bus stop, the arrival of the vehicle signaling the end of their shared time. They reflect on the day's events, with Kisaki noting that everyone has their own unique fears and perspectives, even if they seem different on the surface. He watches her prepare to board, a knowing smirk playing on his lips as he predicts she will be messaging him incessantly until he finally picks up. She offers a simple farewell, but his accurate prediction of her behavior clearly strikes a chord, making her pause for a moment. Because of his teasing, she finds herself admitting that she might have gotten a bit carried away with her intensity. He gently suggests she try to hold back just a little, explaining that sometimes he simply can't answer immediately, such as when he is in the bath. His lighthearted laughter rings out as he wonders if his comment was too strange, but she doesn't join in. Instead, she looks at him with a piercing, almost melancholic intensity, reminding him that while technology is advanced, the person using it must remain wise and self-aware. The boys reflect on their recent defeat in the soccer tournament. They acknowledge that while they managed to beat Class 2-6, the third years were simply too formidable, possessing the club's most skilled players. Their competitive run has come to an end. Looking out over the sports field, the weight of the losses settles in. With both the soccer and volleyball teams now eliminated, the focus of the second day of the ball sports competition shifts to the remaining events. All eyes turn toward the start of the girls' dodgeball quarterfinals. She stands ready, her dark hair tied back, as the announcement rings out that the match between classes 1-3 and 1-4 is about to begin. She and her opponent lock eyes, a silent tension crackling between them. At the signal, they bow to one another, though the gesture feels more like a challenge than a show of respect. Leaning in close, the girl from class 1-3, Sakurako, breaks the silence with a sharp whisper. She claims to know that the feelings involved in a certain relationship aren't mutual, her hand tightening firmly on the other's arm to ensure her words hit home. Meanwhile, in the quiet of the school hallway, he walks with a classmate, his expression unreadable. He remarks that nothing happens within these walls without his knowledge, suggesting a hidden depth to his awareness of the school's social dynamics. Back on the court, the challenger continues her verbal assault, mockingly addressing her opponent as Miss Girlfriend. She advises her to work much harder if she hopes to truly earn the affection she seeks, her smile dripping with condescension. As the game is called to start, she offers a hollow wish for a good game. Her opponent remains silent, her gaze fixed forward as the ball is brought into play. The match erupts into sudden, violent motion. A teammate cheers as they secure the opening possession, but a sudden, high-speed throw catches the dark-haired girl off guard, the ball whistling past with unexpected force. She stands on the court, a figure of unexpected prowess that leaves the spectators in awe. Whispers ripple through the crowd about her being one of the tournament's premier attackers, a reputation she internally questions even as her teammates celebrate her natural talent for the game. Despite the praise, she remains focused, acknowledging to her teammate that her recent days spent observing every match were born from the frustration of her own basketball team's early exit, giving her a tactical edge she intends to use. Across the net, the opposition feels the pressure of her 3 consecutive hits, though their leader, Sakurako, merely sneers at the display, dismissing the skill as a byproduct of having far too much idle time rather than genuine talent. She and her team suddenly find themselves on the defensive as the opponents initiate a blindingly fast series of passes that blur across the court, forcing them to react with split-second precision. This intricate web of movement is the Stella, a signature high-speed passing formation orchestrated by the playmaker Oki, designed to disorient the defense and create an opening for a decisive strike. The coordination is flawless, a testament to the intense practice that allowed these underclassmen to topple even the most experienced and older teams in the school's athletic hierarchy. With the opposing team reduced to a single player in record time, the pressure shifts to Sakurako, who remains unfazed despite her teammates' concern that their opponent's counterattacks are being matched by superior accuracy. The ball becomes a streak of light once more, whistling through the air as the Stella reaches its crescendo, leaving the lone defender struggling to track its erratic and rapid pass. Suddenly, the momentum of the formation is halted as Sakurako snatches the ball from the air directly behind the girl, a shocking feat of reflexes that leaves the entire gymnasium in stunned silence. Her eye glints with a sharp, predatory intensity, signaling that the trap has been sprung and the counteroffensive is about to begin. She lunges forward, hurling the ball with a fierce cry directed at her rival, determined to reclaim the advantage. The projectile is met with a sudden, firm grip as Kisaki secures it against her chest, much to the other girl's shock. She realizes that as long as the origin of the strike is clear, she can anticipate the trajectory and neutralize the threat. Because of this successful catch, she immediately launches a counterattack that strikes a teammate named Akane, leaving Sakurako to curse her own failure to defend the line. Seeing her frustration, a short-haired girl approaches, teasingly questioning if the desire to impress Haru, who is watching from the balcony, is clouding her judgment. The two competitors lock eyes across the court, the silence between them heavy with an unspoken challenge as they prepare for the next exchange. Standing alone in the center of the gym, Sakurako grips the ball, acknowledging the truth of the situation and the weight of the game. She looks toward the sidelines, drawing strength from the teammates who trust her and the fans cheering her name with handmade signs. With a newfound resolve, she decides to suppress her individual pride for the sake of the collective effort, passing the ball to a teammate to reset the play and find a better opening. Despite this tactical shift, she remains fiercely competitive, vowing to be the one to finally crush her opponent as she prepares for a decisive strike. This sudden change in strategy catches Kisaki off guard, as she realizes her own movements have been perfectly anticipated. She is struck by the ball with a sharp thud, the impact sending it flying as the referee's whistle signals the end of the match. Class 4 is declared the winner, but the victory is immediately overshadowed by the sudden turn of events on the court. While her opponents erupt in cheers, celebrating their hard-won triumph, a sense of unease settles over the rest of the players. On the ground, the girl clutches her hand in pain, prompting her teammate to rush over with concern, asking if she has jammed her finger in the final play. Despite the apparent injury, a subtle, triumphant grin flashes across her face for a fleeting moment, unnoticed by the others. Haru, however, is immediately at her side, his voice laced with genuine worry as he calls out her name, desperate to know if she is all right. He watches her closely, a dark suspicion taking root in his mind that this might all be a calculated performance. He wonders if she is merely pretending to be hurt, fumbling the ball intentionally just to draw his gaze and capture his undivided attention. Her teammate, Oki-chan, remains consumed by guilt, pleading to see the injury so they can seek help. She blames herself for the accident, her hands clasped in a gesture of sincere apology while the others look on, unsure of how to react to the sudden tension. The truth is revealed when she finally shows her hand, exposing a finger that is visibly swollen and beginning to discolor. The sight is a jarring confirmation that the physical damage is very real, far exceeding a simple fumble or a minor scrape. Seeing the extent of the bruise, Haru realizes the terrifying depth of her resolve. She didn't just make a mistake, she chose to take the hit. Even as she reassures Oki-chan that there is no need for concern, the calculated nature of her sacrifice becomes clear to him. He stands frozen, staring at her as the weight of her actions sinks in. The realization that she would go to such lengths, even welcoming physical pain to achieve her ends, leaves him deeply unsettled by the intensity of her devotion. As the group gathers around to assist her, the gravity of the moment lingers in the air. For Haru, this display of self-inflicted harm serves as a stark testament to the extreme lengths she is willing to go for the sake of their connection. Later, amidst the clinking of glasses and the boisterous chatter of the post-game celebration, the team toasts to their fourth-place finish. While the others praise her performance and question her role as captain, Haru remains quiet, his thoughts still anchored to the chilling display of commitment he witnessed on the court. He remains quiet, observing the scene as the other girls shower Kisaki with praise for her performance. She tries to downplay her contribution, but they insist she was the one who truly carried the team to victory. Because of the injury to her left hand, one of her friends begins to tease them, suggesting that the boyfriend should step in and feed her. Kisaki tries to stop the teasing, but the girl only grins wider, enjoying the awkwardness she's created. He doesn't take the bait, calmly noting that since her dominant hand is uninjured, she is more than capable of eating on her own. Kisaki quickly agrees, thanking him for his level-headedness while the others look on. This logical response earns him a round of playful boos from the group, who find his lack of romantic flair quite disappointing. He simply offers a mild protest, seemingly unaffected by their desire for a more dramatic display. Moments later, he finds himself helping her anyway, carefully placing a portion of food on her plate. As she takes a bite, a dark thought crosses her mind. She might have fumbled her plan by not choosing to injure her right hand instead, considering it a small price to pay for his undivided care. Kisaki leans over a desk, her long dark hair falling forward as she explains a complex probability problem. She points out that by calculating the inverse, they can simply subtract from 1 to find the answer. Her classmates, Tsukasa and Rinko, shower her with praise, even coining a new nickname, Kisaki. Haruka watches from the side, teasingly suggesting they are only buttering her up because the term is ending, while Kisaki remains pragmatic, noting that efficiency saves effort. As the chatter continues around her, he and another student observe her from a distance. The boy remarks on her social maneuvering, but Kisaki seems focused elsewhere, the background noise of the classroom fading into a dull hum. Later, in a quieter setting, she and Haruka dive into high school physics. He finds a new rhythm in the work, comparing the complex calculations to the satisfying click of a puzzle piece falling into place. He confesses that his previous distaste for the subject has vanished, replaced by a genuine sense of enjoyment. She responds with a calm logic, explaining that once the core formulas are mastered, the solutions naturally reveal themselves. Their notebooks lay open between them, filled with neat equations and diagrams. She commends his progress, calling him a fast learner, while he credits her skill as a teacher for his sudden clarity. A soft, genuine smile touches her lips as she absorbs the compliment. She expresses a quiet satisfaction in knowing her guidance has made a difference for him. Back in the bustling classroom, the social dynamics shift again as other girls discuss the same topics. Haruka listens, his mind still lingering on the private study session they shared. He watches her closely, noticing a recurring pattern in her behavior. Despite being the person everyone relies on, she often keeps her gaze lowered, a subtle melancholy hanging over her even in moments of success. Finally, he voices his observation, bluntly telling her that she hasn't been any fun lately. The words hang in the air, catching her off guard and leaving her staring back at him in stunned silence. She had been trying so hard to bridge the gap between them, even suggesting they wear matching love shirts during a shopping trip, an idea that left him visibly flustered and embarrassed. This wasn't the only attempt. She had even envisioned a romantic scene of them chasing each other playfully along the shoreline, though he found the sudden influx of sentimental ideas quite baffling. Seeking a way to deepen their bond, she had turned to her friend Rinko for guidance, leaving the other girl overwhelmed and struggling to process the intensity of the request. Back in the classroom, he stood his ground, reminding her that while he appreciated the effort, he had to set boundaries, though he was open to finding a middle ground that suited them both. Following his firm stance, she slumped at her desk, her chin resting heavily in her palms as a somber mood settled over her. As she brooded, his attention was captured by a broadcast on the classroom monitor, where a confident contestant vied for a gourmet tour prize in a local quiz. Sensing her lingering melancholy, he shifted the conversation toward the upcoming end-of-term examinations, his mind clearly working on a new plan. With a sudden spark of mischief, he proposed a wager. If he managed to secure the top rank in their year, she would owe him any favor of his choosing. The challenge instantly reignited her spirit, her eyes widening with a sharp, competitive glint as she accepted the bet with a predatory grin. With the gloom finally lifted, they both turned their focus back to the screen, the air between them now charged with a renewed sense of playful rivalry. He watches her with a mix of apprehension and curiosity as she giggles over the documents, her dark hair shimmering under the room's light. She seems delighted, murmuring about how she'll do anything he asks, clearly relishing the stakes of their wager. Because she failed to provide the correct response, he informs her that the time for her penalty has arrived. She doesn't seem deterred, instead pressing her hands together with a playful, expectant glint in her eyes, eager to see what he has in store. The television in the corner suddenly blares with an announcement about a man named Nakazawa-san, who is prepared to skydive while shouting his love for the local area. The sheer absurdity of the televised stunt catches her completely off guard, her eyes widening in disbelief at the extreme nature of the proposed penalty. He stares at the screen, beads of sweat forming on his brow as the reality of the situation sinks in. Despite his earlier bravado, the prospect of such a terrifying feat is too much, and he frantically admits that he simply cannot go through with it. Confused by his sudden change in demeanor, she watches as he abruptly stands up and excuses himself for a bathroom break. He leaves the room in a hurry, leaving her alone with the documents and the lingering tension of the unfinished challenge. Moments later, the door creaks open as Yumi peeks inside, offering the students something to drink. The young girl greets her, but the mother notices the empty seat and realizes she just missed her son, her expression warm and motherly as she enters the quiet room. Her gaze softens, a hint of a deeper, more somber memory flickering in her eyes as she looks toward the window. Standing before the young girl, she decides that it is time to share a piece of their family's history that has long weighed on her heart. She speaks softly, her voice carrying the weight of a secret she feels the girl deserves to know. She recounts a terrifying day from the past when he was just a child, explaining how he had accidentally fallen from the balcony while she was away. The memory clearly haunts her, and she confesses her deep-seated guilt, feeling that she had failed in her most basic duty as a mother. In response to this heavy revelation, the young guest tries to offer comfort, suggesting that she shouldn't be so hard on herself. However, the mother clarifies the circumstances, noting that he had been fast asleep when she stepped away to answer the door for the mailman, making the sudden accident all the more inexplicable and haunting. Yumi expresses her deep gratitude to Kisaki, her voice heavy with the weight of past mistakes. She vows that she cannot allow such a lapse in vigilance to occur again, acknowledging that excuses are no longer enough to justify the danger her son faced. She recalls how she usually maintains an easygoing nature, yet the safety of her son was the one boundary she could never compromise. This fear led her to constantly warn him away from high places or any ledge where a fall might be possible, ever since the accident. Because of that traumatic event, anything even remotely related to falling became a forbidden subject within their home. Hearing this, Kisaki finally understands the true reason behind Haruka's sudden and panicked departure earlier that day. While looking at the young girl through the reflection of the mirror, Yumi observes the close bond the two students share. She asks if Kisaki would use this opportunity to go and check on him, trusting her to bridge the gap and offer the support he needs. She accepts the request without hesitation, placing a hand over her heart as she assures the mother that she can be counted on. Yumi smiles, relieved to have such a reliable and dedicated ally for her son. As the mother steps away to gather more snacks and drinks she had nearly forgotten, the atmosphere shifts. Kisaki remains behind, her expression hardening into one of intense, almost frightening focus. Her fingers tighten, clenching the fabric of her skirt with a sudden, sharp intensity. A silent, powerful resolve takes hold of her, manifesting in the physical strain of her grip. The days of domestic concern soon give way to the academic pressure of the first day of end-of-term exams. A heavy silence falls over Class 1 to 4 as every student focuses intently on the papers before them, the only sound being the rhythmic ticking of the clock. Amidst the scratching of pens, she works with a ferocity that leaves her peers in awe. To those watching her, she appears as a titan, a force of nature completely consumed by the task at hand, leaving everyone else in her way. A week later, the results are posted for all to see, confirming her absolute dominance. Kisaki Tokano stands at the very top, securing the first-place rank in both her class and the entire year with a near-perfect score. She proudly presents her academic achievement, pointing to the top spot on the ranking sheet with a triumphant smile. Her companion is genuinely impressed, noting that her accomplishment is remarkable in more ways than one, acknowledging the sheer intensity of her drive. Building on this success, she reminds him of their prior agreement, insisting that he must now fulfill his end of the bargain. While he tries to reassure her that there is no need for such worry, she remains firm, questioning if he is truly prepared to do anything as promised. As they prepare to leave the classroom, he reflects on the incredible dedication she has shown, sacrificing all their usual after-school time to study relentlessly. He feels a deep sense of responsibility, believing that such monumental effort cannot go unrewarded and that he must honor his word. Her expression suddenly shifts to one of chilling seriousness as she demands absolute, unquestioning obedience to her upcoming orders. The weight of her gaze and the gravity of her tone leave him momentarily stunned, making him wonder if he is being coerced into something far more serious than he anticipated. The tension of the school day finally gives way to the fresh air of the outdoors as they arrive at a scenic riverside. Now dressed in casual summer attire with her shirt tied at the waist, she stretches toward the sky and exclaims how wonderful it feels to be outside, while he stands nearby, still trying to discern the true nature of her mysterious request. Kisaki stands by the riverbank, her dark hair catching the light as she looks toward the water. The air is thick with the promise of a summer day, and she seems poised for whatever the outing might bring. She admits to Haruka that this trip is a bit unexpected, given her usual indoor nature. While he expresses surprise at her choice of location, she cryptically mentions that she has a specific objective in mind for their time together at the river, urging him to set aside his questions for the moment. Stepping into the shallow current, she leans forward with a playful glint in her eyes, calling out to him that the water is refreshing and inviting him to join her. He follows her lead, his sandals splashing into the cool stream as he agrees to venture further in. The peaceful atmosphere quickly dissolves into a spirited water gun fight, with jets of water arching through the air as they laugh and dodge each other's attacks. After the excitement of the water battle, the two settle down by a small grill on the rocky shore, the smell of cooking food filling the air as they share a quiet moment of rest. Once they have finished their meal, she leads him away from the main crowd, navigating through the shallow water and past curious rock formations while he wonders aloud about their destination. As they wade deeper into the more secluded parts of the river, she confirms that they have had their fun, and it is finally time to focus on the real reason she brought him here. They eventually reach a quiet spot shielded by dense foliage, where she suggests that certain things will only get in the way of what she has planned. To his utter shock, she begins to pull her shirt over her head, revealing her swimwear beneath, and leaving him stammering in confusion as she prepares for the next phase of her mysterious objective. She stands at the edge of the water, announcing their arrival at the secluded destination. The young woman explains that her research led her to this specific location, noting its obscurity, while her companion remains speechless and bewildered by her sudden transformation. The boy looks out over the rocky terrain and the deep pool below as she describes the area as a secret diving spot, a revelation that causes his eyes to widen in sudden, sharp realization. He finally understands her intent, questioning if she truly plans to leap from the towering heights above, to which she enthusiastically confirms that this was the goal she had been striving toward. The boy stares up at the daunting cliffside, beginning to tremble as he admits his inability to face such a height despite her expectations. She offers a knowing smile, revealing that her mother had specifically requested she look after him and check on his well-being. This brings back a memory of a conversation with the older woman, who had explained that his fear of falling was tied to a deep-seated guilt over a promise made to his mother. Confronting him with this truth, she suggests that his current life and even their relationship are merely substitutes for the thrill he has been forced to suppress, challenging him to acknowledge what truly makes his heart race. Without waiting for an answer, she begins to wade deeper into the river, leaving him to call out her name in a mix of concern and confusion. As she moves through the water, she reflects on the void within herself, hoping that if she could just experience it again, she might finally find a way to fill the hole in her heart. She leads the way across the jagged rocks, her steps sure despite the treacherous terrain. Behind her, the boy hesitates, the weight of a promise to his mother anchoring him to the shore. He knows the cost of causing her further worry, yet he follows her deeper into the wilderness. Reaching the edge of the precipice, they stand together overlooking the shimmering water. She discards her footwear, the sharp click of sandals hitting stone punctuating the heavy silence between them as she prepares for what comes next. Turning slightly, she explains her motives with a cold, detached logic, admitting she used her leverage to compel his presence. She offers him an escape from his guilt, telling him to cast all the blame upon her shoulders for forcing him into this situation. Because if she plays the part of the villain, she reasons, his conscience will be clear enough to take the plunge. He stares at her back, unable to reconcile her calculated words with the girl standing before him on the cliff's edge. He finally voices his confusion, questioning why she would risk her own reputation and his mother's favor for something so reckless. He struggles to understand what she could possibly gain from their bond if it is built on such manipulation and disregard for consequences. In response, she offers only a faint, knowing smile, her eyes reflecting a depth of emotion that defies his simple logic and hints at a motivation far more personal than she is willing to admit. Without another word, she steps into the empty air, her body a silhouette against the distant mountains as she descends toward the river below, leaving him frozen in shock. The silence is shattered by a thunderous splash as the water erupts, swallowing her whole. He cries out her name, his heart racing as the ripples spread across the surface of the deep pool. As the spray settles, she emerges from the depths, her long hair clinging to her face as she looks back up at him with a sense of quiet triumph and a piece that had been missing. High above, a different figure, a boy with wild, spiky hair and a look of pure, unadulterated joy, launches himself into the air. His ecstatic cry of "finally" rings out as he embraces the fall, a stark contrast to the heavy atmosphere left behind. He plunges through the air, a sudden realization striking him mid-fall. The expected rush of adrenaline or fear is absent, replaced only by a hollow confusion as he descends toward the water. This emptiness stems from a life lived in fragments, a series of events he can recall but cannot truly feel. He sees himself as a child, praised for being a great kid who never caused trouble, yet those moments feel like they belong to a stranger. Even the mundane chatter of his youth, talk of haunted houses, the intimidating size of upperclassmen, or a girl asking to use his first name, are merely echoes in a mind that views its own history as a collection of detached data points rather than lived experiences. As the water swallows him, he sinks deeper into the cold embrace of the river. The internal drive that pushed him to leap, that search for a primordial sound to wake his soul, reveals itself as a hollow delusion. His heart remains unmoved, heavy and still in his chest. His hand drifts aimlessly in the darkening depths, the bubbles rising away from him like lost hopes. The weight of his own apathy pulls him down, and the thought of struggle feels futile against the overwhelming sense of hopelessness. He stands alone in a mental landscape of gray rain, a figure defined by what he lacks. The realization is stark and absolute. He possesses nothing of substance within himself. The world begins to fade into a narrow slit of darkness as he prepares to surrender to the void. The finality of his exhaustion takes hold, a silent declaration that he is finished with the effort of existing. Suddenly, the gloom is shattered by a radiant presence. Kisaki appears before him, a beacon of light and color in the murky depths, her eyes bright with a warmth that defies the cold water. They hang suspended in the blue expanse, their gazes locking as the distance between them vanishes. In the reflection of her eyes, the world seems to regain its focus, the silence of the deep broken by the intensity of their connection. She offers a gentle, knowing smile, her hair fanning out like silk in the current. In that moment, a spark of recognition flickers within him, a realization that something has changed. Looking at her, he understands that his life is no longer a series of empty fragments. Since the day they met, the passing hours have begun to take root, transforming from mere events into something he can finally call memories. He reaches out, his fingers stretching toward hers through the silent, bubbling depths, a single thought anchoring him. Perhaps she is the key to everything. Suddenly, he bursts through the surface, lungs burning as he gasps for the air he had nearly forgotten, the frantic struggle of the depths giving way to a sharp, ragged breath. As he hauls himself onto the jagged rocks, exhausted and dripping, she stands nearby, effortlessly wringing the water from her long hair while playfully suggesting that oxygen is a small price to pay for the chance to understand him better. He can only stare in awe, breathless from the climb and her words, noting how impressed he is by her incredible ability to stay submerged for so long. His hand grips the cold stone, a weary smile tugging at his lips as he acknowledges that such a bold, characteristic statement could only come from her. They stand together on the sun-drenched cliffside, and though he shivers uncontrollably from the sudden chill, he manages a nod when she asks about the experience of their deep dive. He turns to her, his expression softening with a newfound clarity, and explains that because of her, he finally understands what truly drives him. He has discovered the spark that keeps his heart beating. It is a profound admission, a realization that the void he once felt is being filled by the moments they share. His confession makes her beam with a radiant, genuine smile, as she expresses her relief and joy that the dangerous excursion proved to be so meaningful for him. She is met with a mirror of her warmth in his eyes as he offers a simple, heartfelt word of gratitude for the clarity and the truth she has helped him find within himself. A warm summer night settles over the bustling festival grounds, where the air is thick with the scent of street food and the chatter of a dense crowd. Amidst the vibrant stalls, she gazes at the sizzling takoyaki, noting that the unique atmosphere of such a special event has a draw unlike anything else, making even the simplest activities feel significant. As they transition away from the main festivities into the quiet periphery of the woods, he walks beside her, questioning if one could truly identify a haunted location just by its appearance, or if the feeling is more subtle. She counters that while the festival is lively, a true test of courage is more their style, especially now that they have enjoyed the yukatas and caught their fill of water yo-yos to commemorate the evening. He agrees, though a note of caution enters his voice as he mentions the local history of these woods and the unsettling legends of people being spirited away without a trace. Suddenly, the string of a water yo-yo slips from a relaxed grip, the small prize tumbling toward the ground in a moment of distraction. It bounces away into the shadows of the undergrowth, prompting him to quickly reassure her that he will retrieve it before it gets lost in the dark. After bending down to snatch the toy from the grass, he is startled by a sudden, sharp gust of wind whistling through the dense tree-line behind him, carrying an eerie chill. Turning back to where she had been standing just moments before, he finds only an empty path, his voice trembling as he calls out her name into the growing silence of the forest. He stands alone amidst the towering trees, his concern mounting as he searches the darkness, pleading for any sign or sound of her presence while the woods rustle ominously around him. He breathes a heavy sigh of relief upon spotting her standing amidst the trees, her back turned to him as she gazes into the darkness. He calls out to her, glad to have found her after the sudden disappearance, though she remains strangely still. As she slowly turns, a chilling sight meets his eyes. Her face is a smooth, featureless void, devoid of eyes, nose, or mouth. The unsettling transformation leaves him questioning the reality of what he is seeing. His own eyes widen in a mixture of shock and dawning realization, the pale irises trembling as he stares at the impossible figure before him. The tension breaks instantly as she pulls away a mask, revealing her familiar, smiling face beneath. She playfully teases him, wondering if her no-face disguise wasn't convincing enough to get a bigger reaction, while he can only stammer in surprise at the prank. She reflects on the moment, noting that his reaction actually reminded her of the very first time they met, a memory that brings a soft, thoughtful look to her eyes. He admits to himself that he wasn't truly scared or surprised by the mask. Rather, he felt a profound sense of relief just to see her again. He explains that he had tried to manufacture a shocked reaction to play along with her joke, but his genuine emotions made the act fail. The memory of that initial fear lingers, however, as he recalls the terrifying thought of something actually happening to her in those woods. She stands quietly, holding the string of her water yo-yo, sensing the weight of his concern. A somber realization takes hold of him. Since a certain point in his past, the world had begun to lose its color and vibrancy, leaving him drifting in a metaphorical, sunless sea. In stark contrast to his own fading world, she had always appeared to him as a radiant force, shining as brightly as the sun even in the mundane setting of their school days. Returning to the present, his intense, unblinking gaze catches her off guard. She tilts her head in confusion, asking what is wrong as she notices the sudden, serious shift in his demeanor. He stands amidst the quiet shadows of the trees, his gaze fixed not on the spectacle above, but on the girl before him. High overhead, a brilliant firework erupts, its light cascading through the canopy and illuminating the clearing where they stand in their festival attire. She remains captivated by the display as the vibrant colors of the explosion begin to dim, unaware of the intensity of his stare. To him, the grand display in the sky feels secondary, a mere backdrop that pales in comparison to her presence as the world around them begins to fade. He feels a faint, knowing smile touch his lips as he yields completely to the moment, finding himself utterly lost in her. The realization takes hold that the festival and its noise are nothing compared to the quiet connection he feels in this private space. He watches as the fireworks continue to bloom over the distant river throughout the long night. But the most enduring image is the one he is etching into his memory, a vision of her that burns brighter than any pyrotechnic display. Rinko Fukumura stands in the bustling downtown area, the early September heat still lingering heavily in the air as she reflects on her day in her after-school diary, noting the oppressive summer weather. She has just finished the errands her parents requested and now finds herself with an open afternoon and no immediate plans, her gaze drifting as she ponders her next move. Her eyes suddenly lock onto a familiar face in the crowd. At the same moment, Haru notices her, his expression shifting as he recognizes his classmate. They strike up a conversation, and he explains that Kisaki had to leave school early because she wasn't feeling well, though she insisted he didn't need to check on her. Their friend's absence leaves them both with nothing to do, and Rinko considers simply wandering the area for a while, feeling the aimlessness of a summer afternoon. He calls out to her again, confirming her identity, but his voice carries a certain lethargy, as if he lacks the energy for any particular activity. His quiet exchange is suddenly interrupted by the arrival of a tall, striking woman who approaches with a confident stride, catching them both completely off guard. She is Eri, Kisaki's older sister, whom Rinko recalls seeing only a few times years ago. Haru, realizing the connection, asks if the two of them have actually met before. Her presence prompts him to step forward and introduce himself as Haruka Kawatsuji, while she immediately identifies him as the one involved with her younger sister. She offers a polite greeting in return, her sharp eyes studying him as she mentions that his reputation has certainly preceded him. She watches him with a piercing, analytical gaze, her eyes narrowing as if searching for a hidden truth. Haru can only stare back, caught off guard by the intensity of her scrutiny. As they stand together, Rinko quickly tries to downplay their connection, claiming Haru is merely an acquaintance she happened to encounter. Eri remains skeptical, questioning if their bond was actually formed through her sister, Kisaki. The sound of a bowling ball crashing into pins echoes through the air, punctuating the tension. She ponders the situation, unconvinced that their meeting was a simple coincidence. She leads them to the lanes, where Haru applauds her impressive skill. Rinko, however, is internally reeling, unable to comprehend how a casual encounter escalated into a group outing. She explains her philosophy that most coincidences carry a deeper meaning, including this one. Looking at Haru, she notes that he seemed to have something important he wanted to convey. While she maintains her composure, Rinko struggles with the game, failing to pick up a spare and growing increasingly frustrated. She questions the necessity of this sudden trip to the bowling alley, her annoyance visible in her slumped posture. Stepping up to the lane, Haru prepares his shot while she observes his focused demeanor. Sensing his resolve, she decides to stop the small talk and get straight to the point, briefly considering other activities before dismissing the idea. He watches her closely while they take a moment to rest, his mind racing with questions about the Tokano family. He wonders how Kisaki could have developed such a complex personality when her sister seems so straightforward and imposing. Another powerful strike sends the pins flying, a testament to her athletic prowess. The sudden display of force catches Rinko off guard, causing her to choke on her drink in a fit of startled coughing. She begins to speak candidly about Kisaki's past, mentioning her sister's intense obsession with being the best and her various eccentricities. Rinko immediately tries to intervene, shocked that she would share such personal details so freely with a near stranger. She prepares to bowl, her expression hardening as she declares she won't waste any more time. Behind her, the others watch, sensing the shift in her demeanor as she takes the game and the conversation more seriously. While the young man attempts to take the blame for the tension, she ignores the apology, stepping forward with a focused stride and the heavy ball swinging at her side. Her gaze remains fixed on the pins as she bluntly states the truth of their sibling dynamic. She is simply better than her sister. The scoreboard confirms her dominance, showing a significant lead over her companions. This confidence strikes the girl in the school uniform as sheer arrogance, but the elder sister dismisses the need for modesty when providing the answers they sought. She acknowledges that while her sister is widely considered excellent, smart, and athletic, there is a deeper layer to her perfection. She continues her explanation, asserting that despite her sister's many achievements and the praise she receives, she herself remains superior in every conceivable field, a fact that has shaped their lives. This constant comparison is an inevitable weight, visualized by a scale where she is always tipped as the primary success, leaving her sister perpetually in the second position. Even within their home, the atmosphere was tinged by this disparity. Though their parents offered equal love, their unconscious judgments created a divide that the younger girl was keenly aware of. Because of this environment, the younger sister developed an uncanny sensitivity, becoming far more adept at reading the subtle emotions and hidden desires of those around her than anyone else. As she releases another powerful throw, she admits that her sister is both blessed and selfish, driven by a desperate need to be the best that has slowly twisted her otherwise positive traits into something warped. She concludes by noting that her sister is aware of this selfishness and hides it from their family to maintain a facade of normalcy, though the two of them still speak often enough for her to stay informed about the young man's presence in her sister's life. She stands firm, her grip tightening on the heavy bowling ball as she delivers a stern warning. She insists that their desire to help is exactly why they are currently incapable of doing so, cautioning them against overstepping the boundaries Kisaki has established. As she prepares her next move, she explains that those very boundaries were constructed as a defense mechanism to avoid the pain of confrontation. A single pin stands isolated at the end of the lane, mirroring the emotional distance she describes. The vast, echoing space of the bowling alley underscores her next point. It is easy to offer platitudes when one is not the one living through the struggle. She acknowledges the validity of his perspective, but remains grounded in her own harsh reality. A faint, knowing smile touches her lips as she admits that, despite her cynicism, she chooses to believe in the power of coincidence. She expresses a quiet hope that the person her sister has finally opened up to might actually be the catalyst for change. He stares at the digital scoreboard, the numbers blurring as he processes her words. He finds himself praying that his presence in Kisaki's life is indeed the meaningful coincidence Eri suggested, rather than just another fleeting moment. Later, as they walk through the city streets, his companion reflects on the encounter, noting how much the older sister has changed since they last met. She recalls a version of the woman that was far less intense and enigmatic. This observation triggers a memory of their middle school days, where Kisaki would sit in the back of the classroom, isolated by choice rather than by the cruelty of others. It was a self-imposed exile that no one quite understood. He considers the older sister's honesty, concluding that she isn't the type to weave lies about her family's history. If she says things were stable at home, then the root of Kisaki's isolation must lie elsewhere. While he feels a sense of relief that Kisaki didn't endure some overt trauma, he admits to his friend that this only makes her current state more baffling. The lack of a clear, singular cause makes the mystery of her heart even more difficult to unravel. He looks ahead, his expression softening with a strange kind of gratitude. He tells her that he is actually glad the reason isn't simple or easy to understand, as it means Kisaki's journey is uniquely her own. He had just finished speaking, and the weight of his words left her reeling, her eye widening in sheer disbelief as she struggled to process the absurdity of his sentiment. She stammered, asking him what he could possibly mean by such a statement. To her, the idea that common tragedies like bullying or domestic violence would be boring or cliché compared to Kisaki's situation was utterly chilling. He didn't flinch, maintaining a serene, almost haunting smile as he explained his perspective. He compared the fear of ghosts in the dark to the fear of the unknown, suggesting that Kisaki's isolation wasn't a tragedy to be pitted, but a manifestation of pure, selfish mystery. To him, this twisted behavior wasn't a sign of brokenness, but something inherently beautiful. The girl found herself utterly speechless, unable to find the words to counter such a warped worldview. She could only stare at him, the silence between them growing heavy with an unspoken dread. As she looked away, a cold realization began to take root in her mind. If they were truly discussing things that were strange and mysterious, she knew exactly where the real darkness lay. In that moment, she understood that the most terrifying thing wasn't the girl hiding from the world, but the boy standing right next to her, a presence that felt like something that should never have been seen. The culture festival is in full swing, buzzing with energy and the occasional piercing scream. Rinko leans over, gasping for breath, her face pale from a recent fright. Beside her, Matsunaga offers a playful jab, noting that her friend truly cannot handle anything scary. Inside the attraction, Haru sits at the reception desk, greeting visitors with a calm demeanor. When asked why they chose this particular haunted house, the guests explain it was simply because Kisaki's class was the one organizing it. Still recovering from the shock, the young girl with the bob cut continues to huff, her heart rate slowly returning to normal. Her companion suggests she take the opportunity to say hello to their friend, but she demurs, deciding to wait until Kisaki is officially on her break. Nearby, the two protagonists sit side by side in a moment of quiet. He confirms that the source of the earlier commotion was indeed Rinko, before shifting the conversation to the various types of questionable festival food they might sample later. He recounts the incident with a slight smirk, explaining how he merely reached through a gap in the wall, which was enough to send the poor girl into a panic. Matsunaga agrees, acknowledging that her friend is the ideal target for such jump scares. As the group prepares to move on, the athletic girl picks up her guitar case, thanking them for the well wishes. She explains that she must head off to prepare for her upcoming performance on the festival stage. Watching her depart, he ponders aloud why she feels the need to carry the instrument with her at all times. He wonders if she simply wants to be ready for a musical battle at a moment's notice. Silence falls between the two as they remain seated together, the bustling noise of the festival feeling distant. They sit in a shared, heavy quiet, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. Outside, the crowds begin to migrate toward the main stage as the scheduled events commence. The reception area, once busy, is now deserted, leaving the hallways of the school eerily still. Within the seclusion of the room, he remarks on the sudden isolation, noting how it feels as though they have been completely shut off from the rest of the world. She looks at him, her expression unreadable, as if she hadn't expected him to be thinking the same thing. He calls out in alarm as a sudden crash echoes through the darkened room. Kisaki has stumbled, the sound of a heavy impact followed by the rustle of her movement filling the air. Because of the darkness, he can only offer a frantic apology, explaining that he accidentally struck a shelf while trying to navigate. On the floor, she admits she is blind in the gloom, prompting him to ask if she has been hurt. To remedy the situation, he fumbles for his phone, hoping to find a source of illumination. He mutters to himself while searching, promising to bring some light to the shadows. As the bright flash of the phone screen cuts through the dark, he gasps in horror. The light reveals a jagged, bloody wound across her cheek, and she winces, shielding her eyes from the sudden glare. The sight of the injury causes him to freeze, his voice trembling as he commands her to stay perfectly still. She looks up at him, her expression a mix of shock and something softer as he leans in. He moves closer, his concern mounting as he suggests an immediate trip to the nurse's office or even a hospital. He frantically checks if her eyes are unharmed, his focus entirely on the severity of the supposed trauma. Gently, he cups her face, his thumb brushing near the wound as he tries to offer comfort. He speaks softly, assuring her that while it looks bad, he is certain it will heal without a scar. In response to his intense worry, she suddenly reaches up and peels the wound right off her face. With a mischievous glint in her eye, she reveals it was nothing more than clever makeup, asking with a grin if she managed to fool him. She continues her explanation, admitting that even the falling shelf was a calculated part of the ruse. She didn't want to be lazy with her attempt to frighten him and put a significant amount of effort into the performance. He lets out a long, shaky breath of relief, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. While he acknowledges her dedication to the prank, he admits that she truly succeeded in terrifying him. He stands in stunned silence as Kisaki playfully explains that her elaborate, bloody ruse was merely retribution for his own past actions. She seems delighted by the success of her prank, her eyes sparkling with mischief as she teases him for his genuine terror. In the wake of her revelation, his grip falters, and his mobile device slips from his fingers, clattering onto the hard floor with a sharp thud. The sudden noise punctuates the shift in the room's energy as the initial shock begins to transform into something more intense. As he crouches to retrieve the fallen phone, she watches him, her breath hitching as the atmosphere between them suddenly thickens. The playful light in her eyes is replaced by a flicker of uncertainty as she realizes he isn't simply picking up his property. Instead of focusing on the device, he reaches upward, his hand gently but firmly cupping her chin and drawing her gaze directly into his. The unexpected contact sends a jolt through her, leaving her wide-eyed and momentarily breathless. With a deliberate and steady motion, he tilts her face closer, his luminous eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that leaves her paralyzed. The distance between them vanishes, and the air feels heavy with a tension that far exceeds the fear of the haunted house. The light from the discarded phone on the floor casts long, dramatic shadows across the room as his hand remains steady against her skin. Every other sound in the building seems to fade away, leaving only the sound of their racing hearts. He leans in even further, the proximity narrowing until their breaths mingle, leaving her face flushed a deep crimson. She is completely speechless, her earlier confidence having evaporated under the weight of his unwavering focus. His overwhelming proximity proves to be too much for her composure to handle, and with a soft, overwhelmed sound, she suddenly faints. The sheer emotional weight of the moment causes her to lose consciousness, her body going limp as she collapses. Hearing the commotion, their companions burst into the room to find him hovering over her prone form in a state of sheer panic. Eri and the others demand to know what happened, their concern immediate as they see their friend lying motionless on the floor. The incident leads the group to the quiet halls of the school infirmary, where the gravity of the evening's events begins to settle. A staff member later reflects on the situation, admitting to being utterly stunned by the explanation Haru provided for the girl's sudden and dramatic collapse. He stands by as Kisaki, now awake in the infirmary bed, offers a sheepish apology to Fukumura for the scare. She attributes her sudden collapse to the exhaustion of staying up all night preparing for the festival, a sentiment Fukumura echoes, noting the sheer amount of effort her friend had poured into the event. Because of this dedication, Matsunaga remarks that she has never seen anyone work so hard on a haunted house attraction before. Attributing the incident to simple sleep deprivation, she encourages Kisaki to lie down and recover. Turning to Fukumura, she asks if she can stay behind to watch over their friend while she returns to her post, a request that is met with a quiet nod of agreement. The young man leans in slightly, his usually intense gaze softening into a look of genuine care as he tells Kisaki to focus on getting some rest. In response, she looks away, a faint blush coloring her cheeks as she softly whispers her agreement. Moments later, he slides the infirmary door shut, the rattle of the frame echoing in the quiet room as he departs. Fukumura and Kisaki are left in a heavy silence, the weight of the recent interaction still hanging in the air. Suddenly, Kisaki jolts as if struck by a realization, her eyes wide. Fukumura breaks the silence, observing aloud that Haru seems to have changed. She continues her observation, noting that his behavior has been quite different lately. Kisaki can only offer a flustered, stammering confirmation, her hands fidgeting nervously with her shirt. Meanwhile, Eri reflects on the situation from afar, considering the meeting between the two to be a meaningful coincidence. She harbors a quiet hope that the person her sister has chosen will be the catalyst for the change Kisaki needs. Back in the quiet of the infirmary, Fukumura's expression turns serious as she mentions there is something specific she wants to discuss. Kisaki looks up, her curiosity piqued by the sudden shift in tone. Outside, Haru checks his phone, noting the late hour. Realizing he needs to relieve whoever has been covering his post at the festival, he begins to make his way back toward the distant sounds of the celebration. He is walking through the school corridor when a sudden presence catches his attention, causing him to stop in his tracks with a look of mild surprise. Turning toward the source of the interruption, he finds Matsunaga waiting for him. She asks for a moment of his time, but he hesitates, checking his phone and explaining that his break was already consumed by the recent chaos. She dismisses his concerns immediately, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, her expression firm and unwavering. Because she has already taken matters into her own hands, she informs him that a classmate with free time has been recruited to cover his duties. She had sought out a peer earlier, ensuring that his responsibilities were handled so he wouldn't be tied down by the festival's demands. In response to her unexpected initiative, he remains silent, processing the situation. Breaking the quiet, she then poses a simple yet pointed question, asking if they can go buy a drink together, leaving the true intent behind her assertive invitation hanging in the air.